This is going to be a review of Danny from PhilTalk speaking with a gentleman, I think on TikTok. And I'm going to give my thoughts on the way that goes. So let's watch and see how much we can learn. In the description is the source material address, and subscribe to PhilTalk if you like the content. I do, and I'm subscribed, so I would encourage you to do that.
I don't really think it makes a lot of sense to have experiences of God because that would imply that you had experiences of like you experienced omniscience, you experienced omnipotence, omnibenevolence. I don't really even know what it means to experience those things.
It just means a basic experience of God, like in His presence. You don't need to experience.
Did you
omnipotence.
experience omniscience?
You can't experience omniscience. We're not omniscient to experience omniscience.
Yeah, so it doesn't. I mean, it seems like your experiences don't get you to those divine attributes.
And you just localize God.
For God.
It's not to do with trying to make God, like, that doesn't make any sense. I'm not trying to say you don't need to be omniscient in order to experience God.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that what God is essentially is the combination of those divine attributes. And when you're saying you're experiencing God,
well,
you're saying that you're becoming aware of those attributes.
He hasn't actually defined his God.
Yeah, but I'm assuming that we're using the God of classical theism. I think that's a safe assumption. So if that assumption is right, then to experience God is to experience those essential divine attributes. But I don't even know what it would mean to experience any of those attributes. So I don't think the experience gets you as far as you think it does.
Yeah, because I don't believe you need to have the full experience to experience God. You don't. For example, I could experience someone in front of me, but I don't experience.
I think the only thing a Christian should be saying directly would be experiencing who Jesus is, but then whatever that means, right?
Their whole being of them. You're only experiencing an aspect of them.
Yeah.
Okay, what aspect of...
And of course the Holy Spirit, but that's not really a personal, as in a personal, well, I'll hold my tongue for a minute.
God did you experience? What does it mean to say to experience God? What quality did you experience?
Literally just to be in His presence. That's literally what it means.
Yeah, what does that mean?
Bright light.
His presence, what properties are you talking about?
You could, for example, you could use the white light experience, or the.
But it seems like you just experienced white light.
Wait,
you didn't
okay.
Experience God.
Wait, okay. So how do you experience a human being in front of you?
I don't really think it makes sense to say that I experience your intentionality. I don't think that makes any sense. I don't experience your belief.
Clearly, Danny is not a Jimi Hendrix fan.
No, not my beliefs. No. I'm saying as a human being, if there's a human being in front of you,
you might.
Well, I can see the color of their skin. I can see the height. I can see their nose, their eyes, their ears. I know what it means to experience a human body.
Right. So in that sense, I'm saying it towards God with the whole white light, or to be in His presence, His awareness, but not in the same awareness.
You see how I specifically curious? Why are you talking? Just let me do this, right? What I'm trying to say is that if someone were to tell me I experience a human body, I know what they're talking about. They can point out specific properties like color, height, eyes. Those are things have experiences of. It makes sense to me when they say it. But when they say they experience God, then I ask them, what properties did you experience? And then you're saying, well, white light, but that doesn't seem to be any kind of essential attribute of God.
So,
well, Danny, you're a dualist. But I'm sure you believe if you abuse somebody, it's not merely their body that's being abused. So God's like that without the body. maybe something like that.
What does it mean to experience God? Are you trying to say you have to be omnipotent, omniscient?
I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying, what does it even mean to experience God?
Okay, when I use the word presence, do you know what I mean, or do I have to define that as well?
Not to be crude, but what does it even mean to say, to be a dualist and say, I raped this person, but it was just their body that I raped, not them? Or, I loved them, but I just loved their body. Surely it can mean more than that. Just take the body out of the equation. It's an influencer or something like that.
When you're saying presence of, I just take that to be maybe something to do with perception or experience. So it kind of is just another term synonym for these terms. If I'm in the presence
Okay,
of a human body, then I'm experiencing that human body. Sure.
so I'm saying in the sense of him being around you. That's
Yeah.
literally
Look, I'm not.
that.
What I'm not saying that's not clear. I understand what experience means. I know what it means to but there's certain things. If I said, "Well, I've experienced googly glock," you're not going to know what that means, right? And so at this point, experiencing God, I can't differentiate that from experiencing googly glock.
Okay, when I'm saying, oh, so when you're saying googly gog and you're saying God, are you trying to say how do I differentiate between the two?
Yeah,
Oh, okay, in that sense. Well, we don't have absolute knowledge. This is what I was trying to say.
I'm not saying you just give me one property. You don't have to give them all the properties. What is the property of God that you experienced?
It's the fact that people look, when we experience, right, anything in front of us, we don't have absolute knowledge on the fact
Yeah, I'm
that
not
we
making
were
that claim. I'm not making
I
that
know,
claim.
but that's I am making that claim because I'm trying to make the differentiation between
Yeah, I
when you
can
use
grant
it.
the claim. I can grant that. That's not a problem for me, right? But go ahead and answer my question.
Wait, then I promise you, I actually don't understand your question
Okay,
because
so look, I've experienced human bodies. It doesn't entail that I have to know everything about the human body, but I can point out a couple properties. I can tell you what eyes are, what they look like, what color of skin, how all there's things I can speak about, right? But in the case of God, there's what are you even talking about
so
when you're saying you experienced it?
so if I use the example of let's say a light, a form of light that might be different, that we are not aware of, right? Unless you've had that
Super light.
unless someone had in the experience, right? That would just be a form of experiencing God. That's literally what
Okay,
I'm
so
saying.
you're saying when you experience God, what you mean is you experience super light, but I don't think super light is anything to do with the essential divine properties. So how
My friend Danny from PhilTalk is talking to a Christian, and he's challenging what Christians mean to say they experience God. That's what seems to be the conversation. So he's trying to figure out what is it exactly are you saying? What exactly are you? What are the what is it about your experience that you can claim to have experienced the divine attributes, the classical theist attributes like like God's omniscience, omnipresence, etc. And I don't think you can say that, to be honest. Those attributes that are classically God, the attributes that make God who He is, or God. But I don't really think of God primarily in that sense. But just kind of see where it goes.
I
it seems
know
like
because you can't experience the divine properties.
well then you can't experience God.
W- w- that see, this is the problem because I'm not defining it like that. I'm not defining experiences
What
in
then
the
how are
sense
you
of
defining God? No, no, no. Remember, the interesting term is not experience, it's God. I know what you mean by experience. I don't know what the hell you mean by God when you say you experience him.
what I mean by experiencing God. You know the example of the super light. That's just one example of what
I
I'm
don't even know
saying.
what that is.
I,
I don't know what super light is.
hold on, because I want to get to the other point. I'm going to
Do I
get
have
back
to
to it.
like stare at the sun?
Yeah,
Hold,
that might help,
It
Danny.
really is
you're
not that I would take this whole line of reasoning and argument myself, but if you look at something like that you could look up, Tabor light, Tabor, within Eastern Orthodox Christianity, which I'm not Eastern Orthodox, but they have this idea of like an uncreated light, and they do go much into what they mean by that.
This just sounds like Harry Potter.
Well, it could sound like Harry Potter, but you're asking what someone's talking
about. I would say it's more like meditation of some kind, like a particular kind of meditation. I don't know. I'm a pretty stiff Christian, so I don't make those kind of claims. I don't think other Christians are lying or anything. To me, it's like admiring God and Christ and meditating on Him just in a Christian sense, and reading the Word, praying, and then group praise within a body of believers. But I mean, experiencing God, the Holy Spirit, to me, the Holy Spirit is the source of moral support to follow God. For me, that's how I understand it. And like God, I believe in miracles and whatnot, but I'm not gonna make any special claims beyond that, probably.
About. So I'm telling you, this isn't
Harry Potter's better.
Ancient idea, right? That people, or an old idea, I should say, that people talk about. So I'm just saying there's something out there if you're truly interested in.
Okay, there's super light out there, but how I understand classical theism is that it has nothing to do with super light. In fact, if anything, seeing super light couldn't be confirmatory since God is essentially immaterial. So I don't know what y'all are talking about. If you're saying that there's this interesting kind of light, then okay, there's an interesting light out there, but that doesn't get you to therefore I experience God.
So wait, what do you define as experiencing God?
I think that's gibberish.
So,
I don't think it means anything.
What do you think, even if it's gibberish, what do you think theists are saying, or Christians to be more?
He's asking you because he can't understand what you're talking about.
They experience something irregular with respect to the laws of nature, or something like that. That's probably what an anomaly of physical attributes or something. But I don't think they really mean. There's nothing really robust there.
Yeah, there isn't.
Wait, I don't even know what that, like, that's not entirely true. Like, God can give you an experience that could be in the laws of logic, and that would be an experience of God.
Wait, that doesn't make any sense. You think that?
Yeah, it does make sense, because
let me explain to you why it doesn't. Let me explain to you why it doesn't, right? I mean, if you're saying that, let's say I set a trap for you. Let's say where I set a trap for you and you step in my trap, doesn't mean you experienced a human being, right? I mean, there's some indirect causal, there's a causal chain that led up to you experience something that a human set up, but you didn't experience me, the trap setter, right? So if God, I'm fine with saying that, well, I experienced something that I think came from God. I think that if you want to say that, then sure. If that's what people mean.
Okay, I go by that. It's not an issue. For example, the fact that the idea is Jesus coming down 2,000 years ago, people experienced him. The people that have dreams, visions at the time of God, time of Moses and all of that, those are forms of experiencing God. So if you're saying maybe the language is wrong and you're trying to say that God coming down using something as an experience, fair enough. But that's
but then the interesting claim is no longer experiencing God. The interesting claim is you experience something that is the effect of God, and then what the atheist is going to say, why does that necessarily have to be the effect of God? So that's where the conversation then moves. The experience is actually not that interesting.
Oh, well, regardless of the effect of God, I think everything would be the experience of the effect of God, because
that's a problem on your court.
Wait, if you're defining experience of God as those properties, then no human being is gonna ever, even if we were to all go to heaven, experience that fullness of God. It's not possible.
Yeah, that's a big problem for your view, huh?
It's not really a problem. It's just.
Well, then you gotta fix.
Wait, hold on. It's not a problem. This is how we've always understood it. So
yeah. So tell me what
wait.
You haven't really elucidated or elaborated on what it means to say to experience God. So far, the best you've given is I experience things that are caused by God, which then at everything you're experiencing God all the time. I mean, I am.
You can experience.
That's somewhat fair for me. Like, there's things I attribute to God, but they're not like a direct like you can be convicted or you could be. I mean, I've had a couple times in my life where I think there's some sort of divine presence, but it's not. You know, it's not like a drug or something. At least in my experience, it's just admiration towards God, conviction by God, and so that might be a more accurate way to say it. Like he said, I think, if I'm being totally unbiased here. I think there's influence by God, but it's hard to think of it coming from somewhere else. But and we attribute that to the Holy Spirit. But as far as I wouldn't want to say too much. I think a lot of people do sometimes, but I don't want to discount anybody else's experience. But I'm by myself waiting for someone to come in. I was hoping B.S. Lewis would come in, chat, rat, and it's late. Like, I thought it was super interesting. Then maybe like if you're cool enough, bro, I'll come in. Maybe that's cool. I mean, I know I'm small time, but I thought it'd be fun to talk to you. You kind of have this my kind of sense of humor, to be honest. Let's see. But yeah, I like these kind of conversations. So if someone comes in, we can talk more about it. But I'm just gonna listen mostly for now. But if you want to push me on what it means to have experienced God, that's fine too.
Directly the love of God, and you can recognize the authority of His word.
Yeah,
Because you are a
what does it mean
reflection.
to experience authority? I don't even know what that means.
Wait.
I will say Danny is being rather spicy and this rather aggressive for him, as usual.
Actually, I need to make this kind of clear because this is not hard to understand. If God, yes, you could argue you're always experiencing God because you're living in reality, but then there is God doing slightly something different by slightly intervening, making his awareness a little bit stronger. That's a slightly different experience of God. This is not an issue. I don't understand the issue.
Okay, do you think it makes sense to say that to experience God directly? Let's just address that.
It depends on what you
first.
mean by directly. How are you defining directly?
Meaning that you are experiencing the properties that are entailed by the God concept.
No, of course not, because you're then saying you
so
have
no
to be
one's
omnipotent.
experienced God in that sense. Okay, so now
Yeah.
we're left with we can only experience the after effects of God, right?
That's fine. That's not an issue.
Okay. Now, I'm going to say what after effects are necessitated by the God hypothesis.
What do you mean?
What is it that we can count as something being an effect of God?
That would be everything, right?
Oh, in that sense, yeah, if you're defining it in that sense.
That it was a special thing.
Okay, so then you see your problem then is that your phrase, the problem then is that your phrase of experiencing God becomes somewhat of a triviality.
What's called? This is not an issue, right?
You've been saying that 3 times, but I've just demonstrated the issue. You can try again.
Wait. You're trying to say that if you're using reality to use reality, therefore it's the same thing, right? No, because if there's a form of reality that God is using,
how did you characterize me?
If you're using reality to use reality to say that is God, then you're trying to say that everything's arbitrary.
I'm not. I never said that.
I'm using the word reality in that sense, in what you're saying.
I'm just saying that at best, what you are left with is saying when someone claims that they experience God, they're experiencing an effect of God, but everything is an effect of God.
Yes,
okay, so
that's exactly why I used the word
reality. But that doesn't
reality.
do justice to the phrase that Christians and other Muslims and Hindus are saying when they say experience God. They're when, especially those that think that God is the ultimate creator, they're saying they're not telling me that, or they're not trying to tell me that they experience something that depends on him or is the effect of him, because then they would be experiencing God every second, and that's not what they're trying to communicate.
Yeah, I know, but the thing is, if you're using reality, okay, let me put it this way. Let's say, back in the time of the Bible, people had a vision of God, but let's say they had a direct experience of God, so they saw a light.
That makes no sense
God
to
came
me.
up to them.
But should I grant it for sake of argument?
What part doesn't make sense before we move on? Let's not grant it.
To say that you experience God and then characterize that as experience super light.
Okay,
right? Because the super light is not a divine attribute.
Wait, okay. I was actually going to get to the
Just say
point.
that you're in
Look,
the
I
presence
was
of
actually
a
going to get to.
being
Wait, hold on.
more
I was going to get to the
powerful
point.
being.
That light would be an ordinary, light. It would be the person speaking to you. Like the experience would, for example, the only difference is the experience of the light. It might be a slightly different light that you've never experienced before, but it might be a form of a reality that you haven't experienced. It will be nothing new, right? Because the only reason why I bring this up is because this goes into the concept argument of natural and supernatural. But by definition, anything supernatural is a thing that is not
Drink your.
Oops.
I drink your milkshake. I drink it up.
genuinely experienced. But everything supernatural is just a form of natural that hasn't been experienced. That's why I said reality upon reality. It doesn't make any difference. It's just one that hasn't been exposed to or aware to something.
Yeah, I'm not
That's the
really
difference.
following anything of what you're saying.
So I don't have to explain
Can
this.
you
I'm trying to break
explain
it.
presence? Can I ask you to explain presence, please, Danny, if you don't mind? Because what I'm having trouble with is if this is the typical God we're talking about omnipotence. And if it's omnipotent, then why are you sometimes experiencing a presence and sometimes not? And you can see how this maps on to the issue we're already having with what is the difference between experiencing God specially and experiencing God every day.
And if I could maybe just add one thing onto that.
I'm going to need the Pentecostals and charismatics to help me out here.
What you're asking, I think your question is great. My question, though, just for Emmanuel, because you mentioned near-death experiences, are you talking about what you've heard of other experiences, or do you feel that you have had personally this sort of experience? Maybe not near death, but you've experienced the presence and all
Oh
that.
no, I was talking about other people when I was using near-death experiences. I wasn't talking about myself. I was using that as a form of evidence earlier
Yeah,
on.
understood. I'm just because it kind of maybe colors what it is you're telling us. If you're telling something you've experienced versus what you kind of understand about another
Oh yeah,
person's
so
experience.
Hey, Mike.
Whoa, hey, no, I was just listening. I wasn't seeing what I heard somebody talking. What's going on?
I'm listening to Danny, my friend, who's an atheist.
Oh, gotcha. No, go ahead, brother, man.
Just
these Christian on Christian debates are killing me, man. I gotta find some place just to chill and listen and be calm. Yeah, carry on, brother.
Well, Danny is Danny's an atheist and he's talking to some random Christian. I don't know who he is, just on TikTok or something, Clubhouse. And Danny is questioning the guy on what it means. What do you mean you're experiencing God? Like, what does that even mean? And so they're talking about that. So just pipe in if you want to say something. I'll pause it.
So I wonder if you feel like you have experienced this presence and whatnot.
Yeah. So the thing is, what will humans experience will be a form of life and reality. There's nothing new or special about it. The only thing that's new and special about it is someone experiencing that. I think that's the thing that
I don't
Danny's
know
missing.
I don't know what you're saying when you're saying that. You have to be very clear about
That's
what
Danny.
you know of that.
Okay, so for example, as a human being, you haven't experienced all things. There's always a thing that human beings
Sure,
will
I haven't
experience.
seen a lot of animals, for instance.
Right. So that could be that's a slightly minor form, but it's still a form of experience that you may have. People, taking drugs is a form of experience as well. I'm just saying to you, there isn't no new experience under the sun that that exists. So it will always come from God, and we are always experiencing a form of God, but it's not the direct experience. And
Don't tell me that's the real Poop Lewis.
In the wool.
In the wall. Wow. Well, thank you for coming. Yeah. Anything to say so far?
Yeah, you goaded me in here. It's a pretty interesting topic. So,
Yeah.
attribution is a big thing. We've been having a lot of talks with Kenny lately about this subject because he's in the mindset where he just can't be wrong. And that rubs me the wrong way, because my personal deconversion has to do with mental illness and psychosis. And for people who do not understand these types of things, you can experience a lot of what you would attribute to spiritual experiences, and they have perfectly natural explanations to them.
Yeah, I mean, I've had. So the way I differentiate it is something to do with like a conviction for sin or something like that, or like God's ways. So like, um, uh, as far as yeah, like mystical experiences, like I'm kind of a mystic, I guess, but not in a regular Christian sense, I suppose. I think like I don't think Christians are crazy who say this or whatever or that. I just take their word for it if they're trustworthy or whatever. But I think for me, I don't have like ecstatic visions and things like that, or like speaking in tongues. I've never had that kind of thing. So I I feel like for me, the Holy Spirit's like convicts you of sin, and then like I understand God working in the past through the Holy Spirit, like doing actual work in the world, but. I don't see that kind of thing happen very often. I could maybe appeal to one event in my life where I think it was God like doing something, intervening, or something along those claims. So, what kind of Christian were you?
I was born and raised as a fundamental Church of Christ, but on my way
Oh,
out,
okay.
I experimented with pretty much every type of Christianity. Um,
Did you go to
just
any Pentecostal or charismatic type churches like that?
and no, when I say experiment, I didn't actually go to the places because
Oh, okay.
by the time I'm on my way out, YouTube's a thing, and so I'm learning what the Pentecostals think. I'm learning what the Baptists think. I'm learning what the Presbyterians, et cetera, et cetera. And so I just put their shoes on for a mile, and I would fall in love with it. But for every single type of Christianity, I would find something to nitpick at and be like, no, they're not right about this, until I just walked myself out. But I
Oh,
tried
okay.
talking in tongues. I tried feeling the more charismatic stuff, and that was actually probably some of the most persuasive personal experiences I actually had.
Interesting.
Because yeah, growing up, I was a very Bible literal, fundamental, like cessation of miracles. So I didn't think that stuff was in modern day Christianity. So when I started to feel it, which was my misattribution of my mental illness, I took that as verification of the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. And it's pretty hard to overcome those types of personal experiences and be
Would
convinced
you
of
say it
them.
was like a good feeling sort of experience, like a rush of good feelings, or what? How would you describe those things? Just like out of body experiences, or like or more like just ecstatic experiences.
It would be both. I don't know how familiar you are with bipolar, but it's
Okay, yeah.
eleva- elevated mood swings, and so you'll cycle
Mhm.
between deep depression, which is really deep depression. It's not just a sadness. It's like
Hey, Poop.
a nihilistic type of stuff.
Hey, Poop. I'm knowing your biz. Nice to meet you. Carry on, brother.
Yeah,
Hey, Mike.
yeah. Tell him your name. He has a channel too. It's just I call him Poop Lewis as a joke.
It's B.S. Lewis.
Oh yeah, I remember seeing you in chat. Carry on, brother.
Thanks. And the manic side is it can manifest in extreme euphoria, almost superhuman qualities, delusions of grandeur. I thought for times I was a prophet, one of the two from Revelations. I thought I was, I got into Christ consciousness for a bit, so I thought I was the indwelling of Jesus Christ walking around on earth. Um, it also comes with a really a laissez-faire attitude about risk. So you won't care because, and in me, because I was attributing it to spiritual experience, it was like God has a plan for me, so I'm not gonna wear my seatbelt. I'm gonna, engage in risky behavior because when my time to go is my time to go, and it's not gonna be a minute before then. Um, it's hard to explain. You'd have to like
I
research.
think I know what you mean, because like I could see like at certain times like say you like didn't get any sleep for a while and like you get going on some idea, like I've stopped myself from going there a few times probably, you know, like on my way growing up in as a Christian, like you can kind of like see I'm more and more, man, I feel like people don't realize how much they're actually choosing their beliefs. I know everybody's into the determinism bandwagon or whatever, but like is I'm really down with Jonathan Haidt, you know, like what he has to say about that or what I've heard him say. Like it's just like people choose. It's you really can choose what you want to believe, and then you can find reasons to back it up after the fact. Now, I that doesn't say anything to whether something's true or not, but I really think that's what's like the phenomenon of like you know, atheism and Christianity and like, you know, people. Would you say you were compelled by the lack of evidence or the just hearing people talk about it and think about it that you just couldn't believe anymore? Would you say that something like that?
Yeah, my exit out took years. It started with getting rid of Bible literalism. I did a lot of study throughout the years. That's why I'm pretty good with Bible at this point, because I studied my buns off. But it was
Sure. Yeah,
step
like
yeah, step one was getting rid of Bible literalism. Step two was the problem of Christian pluralism, is almost postmodernism. There is no objective standard of which to measure the true Christianity to. And
yeah,
so
you could explain Christian pluralism as you understand it. Like, I just want to make sure we're on the same page. Like, are you saying like the no true Scotsman type fallacy almost thing, only like from a different angle, or what do you mean? Maybe I misunderstand what that means.
yeah, just the multitude of different types of Christianity. So I would go on tons of topic studies, and so I'd say like, what does Christianity stance on divorce? And then I'd go find the Church of Christ one, and the Baptist one, and this one, and that one, all the way to from progressive to uber conservative and everything in between. And they'd all have reasons for their belief. All of them would be backed up by Bible verses, and there didn't seem to be a tiebreaker. And that would happen on multitudes of different topics within the faith.
Yeah, that's an issue, and like every Christian group is taught right in their within their church that, you know, I just believe what's in the Bible. I almost laugh when people say that anymore. Like, because I'm just like, yeah, sure, okay, whatever, you know. Or I'm not a Calvinist. I don't want that title, and I'm, you know, I'm not a Baptist. I'm like, yeah, it's like whatever, dude. I'm just, it's categorizing you based on your beliefs. I'm trying to understand what you think. But so yeah, I think a lot of people like they're like, don't fight out in public with the atheists. You know, I'm just going like, well, if we have stuff to fight about, like or like disagree about, we ought to be practicing disagreeing about it and seeing where we can get with it. I think it's a test, but I hear what you're saying though. Like, so were you? I'm kind of weird because I am like a pretty hardcore fundamentalist type, but like I feel like a lot of fundamentalists similar that's with similar Bible perspectives have a little more like limited places they're willing to go with the text. Like I'm pretty willing to like take on different scholarship on about the text, but I mean, I guess there's like a hard line. Maybe I'm just being rigid or whatever, but um, so I'm all about taking in scholarship and everything, but I do have a few like bottom lines, I guess. But so when you say you like gave up biblical literalism, are you talking about like young Earth creationism or what? Like, or just taking it like really literally, or did that destroy it for you, or what?
It wasn't Yek specifically. I just kind of stood that was a truth from my youth. You know, I never even questioned that. So I never like I understood evolution stuff. But I wasn't stuck on the age so much, but I didn't doubt a creator. If it's 6,000 or 10,000 or like a million, I never tripped too much because the Bible doesn't specifically say. It's weird math
Yeah,
with the genealogies.
sure, yeah. You can find ways to make it worse, and it doesn't even have to be like an issue for a lot of people. But
Yeah.
like, what kind of literalist stuff would you say like fell apart for you?
Are you familiar with the Church of Christ as an
Yeah,
organization?
yeah, somewhat.
So they are very strict on how to live your life. And so their worship services, some of the stricter will even separate men and women.
Hmm.
I didn't go to those. but no musical instruments, 1 cup, 1 loaf. They had rules on how long a guy's hair should be and how short a woman's hair should be, what modest apparel is, purity culture, all that different stuff. And so when it comes to Yekker and creation and all that, origin stuff, who cares? Because that doesn't really affect how you live your life today as much for the average person.
Yeah, they're more about living the life, I guess, right? Is it? They
Yeah.
almost. I live around a lot of Mennonites, and they are similar in a certain way. Like, and that's kind of similar to like. I'm still like I'm studying some of like this guy who talks about like we're all in different groups, kind of like the streams of traditions and stuff. The Anabaptists and all the groups that came from that stream, Baptists and just Adventists, and they have similarities and differences, of course. But okay, so let's just hear a little more of this and then see what we think here.
I'm saying that direct experience would be most likely different. The only reason why I say most likely different is because you can still have the same experience that you've had before.
But I'm challenging that that's meaningless. I don't know what it means to say that you're experiencing God in any kind of direct way.
I'm saying that it would have a slightly different experience to what you genuinely would experience in your everyday life.
But that's going to be a triviality, right? Obviously, if you're experiencing X and then you're experiencing something that's not X, it's going to be different.
That's not an issue. This is what the point you keep saying it's an issue. That's not.
Mike,
You
don't hold back now. What does it even mean to you to experience God?
Oh, dude, man, I tell you what, like anything, I'm 60. I could think way back over. Somebody reminded me of this one. I was a 7th grade in an advanced anatomy and physiology class with graphic pictures of how everything works down there. When I learned that when the seed is leaving the man, it kills any bacteria along the way. There's a secretion that kills any bacteria along the way before that happens, so it doesn't take it into the receiving egg. And I'm like in 7th grade thinking that's like I think you guys call it now in the young Earth creationists call it something came before something else.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Pre-Cambrian.
Yeah, it's like that came and it's like, dude, somebody had to think of that. To put it in advance of the other stuff coming out, and that really gave me an experience. But no, there's been a million over the years. But no, certainly I told you the story when I actually prayed for him to come, and he came, and I rebuked him. Yeah, long story. 2 questions for Lewis when you get a chance, though.
Yeah, go for it.
Shoot.
Oh yeah, Lewis, on your journeys, did you ever get Jerusalem syndrome, where you felt the need to go to Jerusalem and convert, preach to everybody, or something along those lines?
Similar, not exactly. It was a transiency. I really got hung up on the leave all your stuff behind and having a family and a business and a home. That didn't go over so well with everybody else. So it caused quite a bit of disruption within my own family.
I think that's hilarious. It caused disruption with everybody else, and you didn't mention you. So it sounds like it was a successful choice. No, please don't do that. Anybody listening, that's well, I don't know. If you get told straight up, but just don't do it because you read it in a book and somebody else did. But no, my second question real quick was, how do you differentiate nowadays, like your extremes, not necessarily your bipolar, but with your extremes with on what you should believe, on who you should believe, what, which your belief system, you know what I mean? Not related to the other thing. Oh, I've got to tell you this. How old are you? Have you ever seen the cartoon The Tick?
Oh yeah, Spoon. Yeah.
Yeah, the Tick had they made up superheroes, like ones that would never be superheroes, and one of them was Bipolar Man, and he was in bed, and he's like, and the Tick ran in there, and he's like, hey, there's a bank robbery is going on, we need to go right now. And Bipolar Man said, I'll go get those bank robbers right this minute, just as soon as I get out of bed.
Yeah, it's
that's really a graphic picture. Yeah, go ahead, friend.
I forgot what the question was. Oh, it's epistemology. Yeah, epistemology has been super on my mind, and it's always being constructed and reshaped daily because I use cognitive behavioral therapy as my main therapeutic tool to keep me from going psychosis.
But in your readings and your different choices that you've been throughout the years, the different religions, for lack of a better word, how do you now differentiate truth?
I'm naturalistic. So I think it's actually harmful to have a belief in a supernatural realm because it causes cognitive dissonance and it can lead to psychological harm.
So you're not a Calvinist or a Sullivanist or a Molinist. You're an atheist?
I'm an atheist.
Okay, good. No, that makes better sense now. Yeah, the only thing.
Yeah.
Well, the only thing I would never have like a God debate with you. There's my book that references itself over and over, says within itself, you should be able to look up at the stars and understand that there's a supreme being. And since you don't, I don't think you're on a lower level or a higher level. I think you're just on a different, and we will never have a discussion on proof, but I would try to convince you of a young earth. And like, I don't even know, like less than 100,000 years. And simply based on a science experiment I saw in a YouTube video titled Drama in the Rocks. I would encourage you to watch it. It actually shows the actual science experiments that strata forms immediately in a current. And you can take it from there. The world still has to be made by somebody. The little black dot still has to be made by somebody. But no, I would never argue that with you, except I would try to convince you of a young Earth.
Why does the age of the Earth matter?
Because then you can see that if you can imagine the Earth were dirt instead of diamonds, diamonds instead of dirt. The Earth that was made with Adam and Eve was an entire Earth. There was no water above ground, let alone clouds or rain. And if you can see that as a young Earth, you actually get to picture yourself as a lot more important than a 14.5 billion year old Big Bang, let alone a however many million year old Earth, let alone how many million year old Cro-Magnon man, Neanderthal man, current day man. That history gets so reduced, you look a lot more important. And God all of a sudden does not have like zillions of people to look after, but very few.
Well, which one's the more prideful stance, old Earth or young Earth?
I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know.
The old Earth is actually more qualitative. You actually zero it in on something, something. We say it comes from God. We don't say it comes from nothing. We say it comes from God, which could, in your terms, literally be the Tooth Fairy, Santa. No, seriously, I'm not putting you down. I'm not putting us down. It's like us looking at you saying you believe in the Tooth Fairy and a little black box that blew up. And we would say, oh my God, go for the black box. The Tooth Fairy's fake. You know what I mean? We can't even have a discussion if you don't. I would never try to convince you. I would test him. I would test him. If I were you, I would pray to him, since you don't believe in him, and test him. Oh, you're not supposed to test him. Well, guess what? That's in my book. You don't believe my book. I would test him. I would pray for something specific, something only you could, not like $1 million or.
Mike, I've been a Christian more of a majority of my life than I have an atheist. Like, I didn't forget everything as I walked out the door. It's not like I need the instructions on how faith works and how prayer works and all this stuff. Like, I understand how this stuff works. It just never did work. I've asked him for lots of things, never to be delivered upon.
Interesting.
Yeah, I used to be a Christian, but I'm okay now too. I wouldn't pray as a Christian.
Mike's Hebrew. He's a Hebrew root.
I would not pray as a Christian for anything, although I did, and I would not pray as an atheist for anything. But I would advise you, if you're having doubts, I'd give it a shot tonight. I'd even how about something The Suez Canal. The Suez Canal gets blocked tonight, and it's God's doing. How's that? That'll prove there is a God. If that happens tonight, that will prove to you that there's a
There
God.
you
No,
go.
I'm telling you. I'm not asking you. I'm telling you. I'm putting it on the record. I'm doing the prayer for you. All right, we good? We'll check in tomorrow night.
So if the Suez Canal is not blocked tonight, I can fairly say that God doesn't exist.
Correct.
True. Really?
And I will never try to convince you on a young Earth. I will support you in chat.
And I can keep going around saying Mike Banner has proved to me that God does not exist.
That's correct. You only. You and I had a little contest, and it proved out wrong. Somebody else can try it.
Eddie.
Okay, let's make it more interesting than the Suez Canal, though, because I have a pretty high bar for miracles. It has to be something not achievable by physics.
Are you saying that you wouldn't, if that happened, that wouldn't stop you in your tracks for a second?
Is politics physics?
It's of physical beings. So like something, okay, so the question to atheists that gets put a lot, like what would it take to make you believe? And I think about this a lot because I want to default to the Dillahunty answer, but I know that's not fulfilling for a lot of people. So like, no. But honestly, as a guy who has mental
wait, Poop, tell us, or Lewis, I mean, I'm sorry.
Poop's fine. Poop's fine.
But why don't you can you just lay out the Dillahunty answer for the audience?
He doesn't know it would take to get him to believe, but he knows that God knows because God is omniscient. So
Perfect.
God would know.
So if God exists, he would know what it would take, and so that's his answer. But yeah, I think there's something wrong with that answer on some level. But
that's genius.
Yeah, it's shifting the blame, but it's actually
it's genius. It's genius. It's truth. We are going to deny him when we die, and Jesus did when he died. He knows we're at. He knows. We all know what's going to happen. What? I don't know. It's genius. Yeah.
So what have you come up with, Lewis?
So if I had to be pressed for a specific instance, I as a male would pray to get pregnant with a litter of kittens. And I think
that would do it.
Ken Hovind would pee. Hovind would beat his. Well, yeah, we won't say that.
And
I can't do that though because it would ruin Kent Hovind's ministry. Yeah,
he would be done. But I think it would violate two pretty well established physical laws of. Well, now I'm saying I as a identifying male, whatever. I'm not doing the man can get pregnant thing. I'm saying.
Oh no, this sounds like a 70s one. Yeah, you're fine. You're fine.
And so also interspecies, dogs coming from non-dogs and stuff like that. So
okay, would this suffice? What if let's say, okay, you prayed that, and then you went to bed and you had a dream that you were a woman, really intense dream that you were a woman, and you woke up and you grabbed your, genitals and you realized, oh, thank God I'm still a man. And then you looked down and between your legs was a litter of kittens without their mother.
Oh my God.
Would that do it?
That would be pretty close because I'd have to ask everybody in the house, be like, well, where all these kittens come from? And everybody's like, I don't know. Because there's still the likelihood they could be pranking me, but that'd only be if they're listening to this broadcast and they were really mean. So
see, because I think that's the only way it could happen, something like that. But I think that would be like God saying, like, it's not exactly what you asked for, but like at a certain point, like that, that's how I see things like that. Like if something like that was to happen, like that ought to be good enough. Do you think so or no? Or do you think you would just, and if you would say that you would talk yourself out of thinking that was a miracle, then I want to say that that's problematic for like you being, if you're saying you're open, I want to be skeptical of that claim if you wouldn't take that as a viable outcome.
I would, but I've learned as a skeptic that I want specific prayers answered because I don't want to have to do the second guessing. You get it? And so part of that pregnant with a litter of kittens is that I want the experience as a man of feeling what gestating a bunch of kittens in my belly, walking around with them for months, figuring out, hey, how am I going to get these little bastards out of me? And like,
see, that's the problem because then you wouldn't have a birth canal, and then when God makes them, you like actually, have a C-section or have it come out where it shouldn't or something like.
Yeah, I don't even know the uterus.
Like, I said pregnant, and pregnant women have vaginas, and so like.
Yeah.
So
It
you could
would be.
always quibble. You'd quibble God to death, if you will, as it were.
It might, but that would be a really good classification for a miracle if I was hard pressed to actually give a specific example. I can't think of, like, I don't even know about like arms growing back, because I know that lizards have the ability to grow tails back, so it wouldn't surprise me. I watched a lot of Spider-Man growing up, so it's like the Dr. Lizard guy, he made the formula that let him regrow his arm back, and it's like, oh, that's still a scientific possibility, you know, like.
Sure, right. So see, because I think you could just like, you could actually, you know, you could, it's almost any miracle, like down the line, you can like talk yourself out of it. Like, I promised myself I wouldn't talk myself out of the one time I think God actually did give me a dream, and the experience I had. It was just like too many coincidences on top of like a really intense dream that had meaning. And then like, so like, you know how people say like, God wants you to have faith and all that. And like, there's something maybe true about some of that. Like this idea that God's given us it depends on what kind of Christian you are, whether you accept something like this, but it's like, what do you want God to make you believe? Like, or is he going to force you to believe? Like, if you're not deterministic, you're going to think like, well, there seems like there might be something to that. Cause like, that's the problem of God's hiddenness, right? Like, what do you make of that? Do you have any thoughts on that?
When given the choice between hell and free will, I would give up my free will in a heartbeat. If hell is as bad as people describe it to be, it's not even a question. I wouldn't think twice about it.
So, I mean, I've said that too. Like, you know, can be like asking for forgiveness for sins, and just like asking God to like make you not sin. But I'm not even sure if that's a viable thing to pray for in a certain sense, because like, and I mean, it's almost like applicable for any type of Christian. Like, there's something to letting the problem of evil gets really sticky for me when you start talking about us having our free will taken away for some, you know what I mean? You get the problem. For me, that's a huge issue. Like, I see a lot of issues like the Calvinists raise and their thoughts on it, and I think there's an issue kind of either way. But for me, like, the bottom line for me has always been like, there's some sense that we're free and God's letting us choose, and that's why evil exists. And like, without freedom in some kind for that, I just struggle with making sense of the problem of evil with all the suffering and stuff. Like, it seems like he gave us dominion on some level, and then now it's become kind of a test. And because I just feel like God's so separated from evil, if I'm going to take the faith seriously. But anyway, I won't go down that any further unless you have some thoughts on it. But
no, that's a favorite topic of mine too. I think that free will is one of your guys' best defense for the Christian problem of evil, but it only kicks the can down the road.
Say that one more time, please. I can't rewind. I can't rewind on here. Just that last statement. Go ahead.
I think free will is one of Christianity's best defenses for the problem of evil, but it only kicks the can down the road to heaven.
Okay.
Because you have to think what's going to happen when you wake up in heaven. Is there going to be another tree of knowledge and good and evil there? Or what happens to your free will? And if your free will is gone in heaven where there is no sin, why earth?
Right. So you probably don't. I'm sure you don't know my theodicy. It's kind of like, I'll see what you make of it. Let me give it to you. It's kind of like Satan falls and he does a rebellion. Why didn't God just zap him out right then?
He did. So, well, he did. He got the final judgment that we're going to get later. He got the final judgment right away, but he asked for more time.
Right. I
think he's going down no matter what. He can't. There's no repentance.
Yeah, God's. I would say God has made that clear prophetically, but I would say the reason it's playing out and the whole problem of evil exists is because God was going to let his rebellion play out, and then he was going to redeem like a portion of people who trust him, and now he's letting the rebellion play out in such a way so that when he ends it, those that trust him will absolutely fully see, the folly of the rebellion. And that way, that maintains free will. And then in the end, that's what God's doing. He's making it so it's clear to everyone he allows them to freely act, and then it'll be clear to them in the end that he lost. The ones that trusted God will see it fully, and so that's why it'll maintain free will. And then nobody, it'd be like to sin at that point will be to like right now I can freely go outside and eat a dead cat or the dog poop in the yard, but I'm not going to do it. Something like that, like that's why there's evil existing, is because he's allowing it so that he can end it. Something like that.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, but in order for heaven as a concept to work, you have to have the perfect subjective and the perfect objective. So the individual has to be perfect themselves, and the environment has to be perfect, because mental illness is a thing. I'm going to keep bringing this up over and over. Like, people might go out and eat the dog poop because they're not right in the head. And so,
yeah, and they're innocent, I would say.
Yeah, not right in
See,
the head.
There's a third. There's not just two. There's a third. If you can eat the dog poop and immediately be healed of anything from it. You can do there's not an on-off switch. Has not just on-off. It's you can have both or neither.
And
no, go ahead.
I entertained that for a long time too, is just make no consequences. But I think that would wreak havoc on just reality itself, because that's actually a long road I don't want to get down. But one question I'll ask you guys, because I've been tuning in lately, is sin is the transgression of the law, and no sin, no evil. So by logic, God should never issue any commands if he wanted to avoid evil in the first place.
Well, I would say they're innate, created innate, the moral commands. They're just codified at Sinai. So I would say at least those types of commands or anything related to them. It doesn't have to be the Ten Commandments in particular, but I think that makes sense.
I'm talking even back, because I'm simple. So I go back to the garden where they had two commands: to till the land and work the land, and then not eat the tree. And so a violation of either of those would have been the entrance of sin into the world. And they chose the tree, obviously. They didn't get lazy and stop working the land from the text,
Yeah. Well, what would you say to this? What if I'm going to make a claim that the moral principles in the Ten Commandments, you could almost make a case that all of them were broken when they ate the tree?
I'm rehashing what the laws are in my head. Hold on.
Yeah, really, that's a good one.
Oh, there's they lied. They took from God what was his. They took his name in vain. They made something an idol over God because they knew they weren't supposed to, and they were God's word. What it should have been over that. She coveted after the fruit before she ate it. She stole it in a sense because it wasn't hers to be eaten. She lied when she spoke about what God said. The only thing she didn't seem to do is break the Sabbath. But
yeah,
so it was on the Sabbath. That's why he died on that day. 900 years later, it was on that same day. In this day, you guys want to say, "Oh, a day is 1,000 years, and we live to be 960." Yeah, that's still not 1,000. I don't know. So let's just take a look at the day. It was God was resting, and they started to fool around. That's all that happened.
Yeah, I'm still gonna kind of go to as far back as I can. Why is
the
tree?
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. No, they didn't till the ground, though. They were just told not to eat of the thing. That was a little bit later.
They were instructed as their first commandment to work the ground. That was their first thing. And then the second thing was not eat the tree.
You mean tend the garden?
Yeah, so one's a positive command, one's a negative command. So one's a
no, I think they're both positive, tending the garden, because mankind created the garden.
I mean a do and a do and a do not command. So do this and don't do this. So when I say positive, negative, that's all I mean.
Right, just the tree though, because
that was a do not.
Yeah, wasn't the till the ground after they sinned? Or I can't remember for sure.
No, they were kicked out after they sinned.
He's saying tend the garden equals till the ground. And I'm saying, no, that's sway.
Oh, sorry, I meant tend the garden, but like not till the ground. But
Gotcha.
If we're going to narrow down on the curses, I think they were still probably tilling in the garden, but it starts saying that when they till after the curse, it's sweat of their brow, and it's actually becomes hard labor instead of before it was supposed to be easy, I guess.
Yeah, mankind was created first, and then the man, Adam, was created within the garden. So that would be where all your other peoples came from.
But the question is the $1,000,000 question, and I actually did a video on this, not my last one, the one before, is why was the garden there, or why was the tree there in the first place? Why did God plant the tree?
Well, we don't know that God planted the tree. It just says he planted all the trees in the garden, even the garden of life that's in the middle. And also in the middle was like the tree of knowledge of good and evil, something along those lines. It's called the rubber tree theory. I don't believe it, but I would explain them to be our mother and father gods.
Like Enki in little stuff?
Like one is the Holy Spirit, one's the Father. You can't have one. You can't touch the tree of life. The fruit of the tree of life.
Why is that? How does that transfer into modern day when everybody thinks they have the Holy Spirit now?
Yeah, really. Yeah, she's fire. She's not God Almighty himself,
Yeah, I don't like that theory.
or a
Mike,
little drop of him
Mike's got
coming out
some
of a
different
bucket.
ideas. I have a more traditional view of the
Yeah,
story.
yeah. Go ahead. Yeah, I don't want to get
But
into
that's
Mike.
okay, Mike. I'm not trying to
No,
shut you out
no,
or anything. I don't
no.
care.
It's, I want to go hear what that you go ahead. Not me. You guys. Go ahead.
No, and it's fine. I don't want you to feel like you can't say anything. I'm just I think as far as not or why would God put the tree in the garden, right? I would argue that God knew they were going to eat it. Like I think that's you kind of deduce it from the things he makes on each day that he knew they were going to fall. The question is, do you think that necessitates that he caused it? Though I guess would be one question I'd have for you.
Well, that's the why, and whatever the answer to this question is, the answer to the problem of evil. But it's a subjective question open to interpretation. So
Yeah, I feel the necessity to say they could have not eaten from it.
yeah, because a lot of people will also fall back on free will as a defense in this case, and I have to shut them down immediately because they already had the free will to eat from every other tree in the garden. And so just having a negative choice isn't necessary to exercise free will. You can choose from two good things, you know?
Now, I don't think they actually took of the tree of life ever, let alone saw it, because if they
Sorry, no, knowledge of good and evil. Sorry.
yeah, well, no. I'm saying the right way, because both were in the midst, and she had not seen the tree of good and evil, so she probably didn't even see the tree of life, and it doesn't say that they ever took of it. So I think that they were kids, and as they grew up, they would have the choice later on of that tree of knowledge of good and evil to go on to adulthood or not, or the tree of life once they found out they're good, but no, it's we have no information that God walked with them. When he says, I heard your voice walking in the cool of the evening. No, Adam was walking in the cool of the evening and heard his voice. That's all that means. He didn't sup with Adam. He didn't teach him the alphabet and sit and sup with him. When he named the animals, he didn't name them Tom, Dick, and Henry or lion, tiger, bear. He named them clean and unclean. He was looking for a mate. Carry on, gentlemen. Go ahead.
Yeah, that just seems like a stretch. Like, I don't know where you're getting that from the text, but okay.
Well, so yeah, we can talk about whatever you want. I'm curious your thoughts on anything, but are you saying? So you said you thought the free will argument was the better defense or whatever. So is that? Do you think a free will defense? You mean like a libertarian free will defense, probably, right?
Yeah, that's the most common one given, and it's one of the better theodicies I've heard. But that's why atheism is awesome, because you don't have a problem of evil to have to solve. Because what we're seeing when it comes to the food chain and life and death cycles is perfectly expected on naturalism. Whereas when you have an powerful and omniscient God, that's where the problem is, omnibenevolent.
Yeah. So are you a what are your thoughts on morals and all that? I guess you're not a moral realist then, huh?
I'm subjective moralist. I think
Okay.
we shape them because, as I see morals, they are a social contract between two or more people. And so I don't think morals are inherent to one person. I think if you were living in the jungle by yourself, you would have a different moral code than if you're living in an urban landscape surrounded by people, you know. And so us being evolving creatures, we study the behavior of our parents at first, our siblings second, then your neighbors, relatives, and so on until adulthood, and then we see what is and what isn't expected in the societies that you live in. It's pretty easy.
Do you think that those societies that have just your regularly recognized standard morals without knowing anything about the biblical Ten Commandments morals, do you think that one of their morals is resting every seventh day, or just work 24/7 like a slave? And oh my goodness.
I think that it wouldn't have taken us long to figure out that we don't want to get burnout, because say we're back in the times where we have slaves. If you have those slaves and you're working them 7 days a week, you're going to probably notice you're getting less productivity out of them than if you're giving a couple days off. And it would probably just lend you to be like, well, this is like me akin to having to maintenance my cart or my hoe or something, because stuff breaks down, people break down, all these things break down, they need maintenance. Like, this isn't.
I don't think they respected people that well. I think, if you don't mind me just being frank, I suspect that that's a little bit of a bias that you're putting on the text, because like it's portrayed in the giving of that commandment that it's like it's sort of supposed to be like a blessing for the people of God, but then it goes on to say like even the animals get to rest, and like so that would seem like what you're suggesting would be like, well, they're just flowering up the necessity of letting animals and people rest. But it seems like that's kind of strained to think that, oh, we're going to look bad later on because we worked our slaves. Like, who cared about what happened to a slave when they would have written this, right? So like,
no, they were expensive. No, you said, you want to take care of them. Yeah, you want to keep them healthy, not overpowering healthy, but
no, I'm doing like an intrinsic critique from like an atheist, like kind of presumption that because I'm saying the text actually seems to say like it's a blessing to the people, and then but it's to be afforded to the stranger and your gate and anybody that visits you, and including your animals even. And then so that you'd have to like think, well, they're trying to make it sound good when it's really just about the necessity of rest or whatever. But in the text, and then I'm thinking like, would they really have thought that through or cared to say it that way? Like back when it was written, like, oh, we want to make it sound like we're not slave drivers because that's bad, but we're really slave drivers. So like, let's make it sound good, but we really just want them to, what I mean? Like that just seems strained or something. Do you get what I'm saying? Or is that not making sense?
I don't think they cared that much about slavery back then. I think it was so normal that it would be like just normal everyday thing, like taking care of your car. Like I really, because I think there was a big dehumanization and separation between slave and non-slave. So I don't think.
Well, what about like in Egypt? Like the Pharaoh didn't seem to care about that.
Yeah, and he was being a dick, but I think I'm not taking my moral stance from the Bible either, because one of the moral dictates that we're talking about also is honor thy father and mother so you may live long in the land that the Lord has given you, which didn't happen because unless you're going to say they stopped honoring their mothers and father, but they got driven out in slavery by other nations like multiple times, and then there's the diaspora and like the Holocaust, and so like obviously all the Jews stopped caring about their mothers and fathers because like God's not giving them the promise of the being in the land that he gave them stuff. So that stuff doesn't make sense to me.
Oh yeah, I would just say it's given in contextual form to when it was written, and then
that's subjective, and you're in my boat. You believe in subjective morality with me, that it's time and place.
Well, no, I mean like the idea of honoring your father and mother would be a timeless moral command from God, but that the aspect of it saying like in the land that I give you is incidental.
Why separate the two though? They're like conjoined.
Well, partly because what my theology dictates, but I mean, to make it coherent to me, the moral commands of God can't change.
And they're shouted down to all the Israel, everybody. The 10 Commandments were heard by everybody. There wasn't that many Israelites. There was only 4 generations out of 2 million people. That's sojourners, Egyptians, strangers that joined them. That that survived.
Yeah.
They all heard those 10 commands.
But I think a better moral principle is honor other human beings in general, because there are instances where I'm sure we can all agree on that maybe honoring your mother and father isn't the best idea, but also like shouldn't a parent be honoring a child as well? Like this isn't a role-based type of thing, it's a respect for others type of thing.
I'll let the other guy welcome in before I hush up. I just want to say that my theology doesn't follow anybody's here, and since I believe in the Holy Spirit is the mother of God, that would be the mother that you're supposed to honor, and the Father being the Father in heaven that you're supposed to honor. And Jesus, on the first couple commands, he's the one. He's the God that you're not supposed to make images to. That's our Jesus. Welcome in the new guy, Jamie. I'm hushing for a while.
Hi.
Hey, nice to see y'all. Hey, Mr. Lewis, Mike, Jamie.
Hello.
Just listening in, man. I figure I don't join Jamie's channel too often. Came to pay you a little visit for 30 minutes or so. I will say, man, I believe in young Earth as well, and I also believe like these mesas, like I'm showing here, were giant trees before the flood. And I believe in a geocentric cosmology as opposed to the heliocentric spinning ball Earth. All right, that was it.
Cool. I have a question for Mike about his Holy Spirit female stuff. How do you?
Yeah, go for it, man. Yeah.
How do you go to the text when the Holy Spirit is continuously called as a his?
Yeah, it's probably all New Testament. In the Old Testament, it's actually feminine.
You disregard the New Testament?
Well, I disregard that you think it comes from the Greek, and well, it's originally. Let's see what the original Hebrew says, and then we can discuss it. But we don't have any of those right now. Matthew, we got a Hebrew Matthew, and we got fragments of almost every other one. We have a Hebrew Revelation, but no, we can't distinguish in those just yet.
Are you equating? Who's echoing?
Oh, I might be on speaker. Speaker. Hang on. Here, how's that? Go ahead.
Check. Yeah, that's better. Are you equating the spirit of wisdom and like Proverbs and stuff to the Holy Spirit? Is that where you're making the connection?
I would add that to it, yes, but I wouldn't hang my hat on it. Woman wisdom of Proverbs 9, and the something else. But no, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wondering because it's consistently referred to as a male entity. It doesn't really matter because can spirits have sex anyway? I don't think so. I think that's a stupid concept, but you can't have a father.
The Song of Solomon, I think, is the father and the mother as they're courting each other. I think the Song of Solomon is that. I don't think that is Jesus and us or his bride or whomever. I think that's the father and the mother at the beginning of time.
But can't you see a problem when we have this type of allegorical interpretive language? This goes to what I said in my deconversion with Christian pluralism. I'm really artsy. I'm really artsy. If you watch my channel, I love wordplay. I love all that stuff. I can make the Bible say anything I want it to, just by using plug and play symbolism, using allegory, stuff like that. And that's inconvenient if you're saying that there's a truth, an objective truth of Christianity.
Right. I would never no more preach Christianity to anybody than the man in the moon. It's
Torah.
Yeah, Torah. No, since about the year 300, it's not really been the same thing. But you guys change the definitions. You're giving me, Jamie's giving me new things like Calvinism, Sullivan, Molinism. I don't even know. Advanced progressive covenantalism. Good gracious alive. But the Jews and us all together have changed the definition of words. For instance, you can probably hold up your Bible. Well, you're an atheist. So you could probably hold up your Bible and say, this is the word of the Lord. Okay, you have just changed the definition of words.
Yeah.
Okay.
But this is
Elohim. You will not find the precious name of our Lord Yahovah in the first entire chapter of Genesis. It's Elohim, and don't tell me that's one God. That's plural.
That's a plural.
Elohah. That's plural. There are gods. Gods created the heavens and the earth.
And I'm not disputing that. Like I think that that the Bible's fucked off when it comes to language. But
Exactly.
I mean, the problem with the translation stuff is way earlier than 300. Like, have you read Philo? Philo is
they all have an agenda. They all have an agenda. If you look at the back of Philo, it probably says V, Philo's version, King James version. Everything's a version. Just give me the text. What? You think I'm stupid?
Philo is a Jew. Philo is not a Christian. He's a contemporary of Jesus Christ, and he's one of the most leading contemporaries we have of Jesus Christ when it comes to writing. But his big kick was he was a Hellenistic Jew, and he was basically reinterpreting the Torah to fit with Platonic and different Greek philosophical thought processes. But he would do a lot of the same tactics that you're doing when he's plugging and playing, when he's substituting words for other concepts, and he basically got Plato's Republic out of the Old Testament.
And to this day, we are still a republic with an eagle. In our capital is a diamond in shape in the middle of Virgin Maryland. Yeah, we don't belong to. Yeah, we're a good Christian nation. Trinity and everything. We're all going to hell.
Well, I think that's why I accept scholarship, because and why original context is so important, and it scares so many fundamentalist Christians. But I think we have to do that if we want to know what they were meaning, and then we can apply that and look for ways that is for us. In other words, if you believe in future prophecy or whatever, I think that stuff's are important, and people. That's one of my desires, to see more people not be afraid of that sort of thing. I guess, because I think I can relate to anybody on all sorts of different things, but I think we have to do that, or we're just lying to ourselves. If you know what I'm saying, when a fundamentalist Christian will hear oh, did you know that the story of the idea of the sea being like a scary place where there's sea monsters, and this primordial story of this Leviathan in the in the sea, and then that becomes something in Revelation that's used to talk about the people, and then Satan's like the spirit. It's like, that's fine with me. That probably was a contemporary context of the ancient Near East, and we should acknowledge that and not be afraid of that fact. Things like that, well, it can't be that, because I think it can be that, and there's nothing wrong with that. So things like that, I think, are okay to recognize.
Don't you think that's just a big problem when we have churches living in the countryside in America, all proclaiming to preach the truth of Jesus Christ and the gospel, and
amen,
there's no telling the truth from the false. There's no identifying a wolf in sheep's clothing, because the sheep costumes are all too good.
And if you get caught putting out a cigarette in the parking lot, my God, don't even go in. They'll all stare at you, or something else minor. You know what I'm talking about. You can go down to the church down the street if you don't like this church, because they might have the truth.
Yeah.
Well, I would say, I mean, I'm not the judge, but I think, Christianity is more than just, I mean, there's key truths to it, right? I mean, it's the story of, moral gone awry, and God trying to call back people to himself. And, I don't know how much do you have to understand to, be reconciled to God? I don't know.
Because for me, it's all about the sales pitch. So it's about getting people to believe the gospel, or have Jesus in your heart, or whatever the different terms are. But the question for me was, once I seriously was ready to dedicate, I didn't know what to do. And I would just get conflicting answers. And whenever I read from the Bible, I would get people trying to get me to second guess what I was reading the Bible. Because, like I said, the transiency thing, giving stuff away, seems so blatantly obvious to me. And I thought for a long time, I was like, this is what's wrong with Christianity, because nobody's actually doing this.
They're not serious enough, you mean?
Yeah, zealousness. And that is a benchmark for fundamentalism. And that's when I believe now that religion starts becoming, you know, from being passive to dangerous.
Yeah,
Is
it can
once
be. It can be, especially when it's hypocritical, right? I
That
mean,
was a rich man, right? That was a rich guy.
it's not only that, it's the root of money is the love, or love evil is the root of money, or whatever. And then there's a lot of different texts in Jesus' teaching, not Paul's, because whenever I bring this stuff up, it goes to Paul, and whoever doesn't feed their family is worse than a non-believer or whatever. And it's like, well, that's one verse against like a dozen verses in Jesus' Gospels. And
No
so,
women talking.
yeah, let's talk about that. I'm big on that subject. So,
yeah, I'm not a
what
fan
do
of Paul.
you're what?
I'm not a fan of Paul. I think he's not teaching Jesus's gospel just from reading it for myself.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting because so I have friends who are, or I have a few acquaintances, let's say, people I would call friends that say Paul is not an apostle, and I think that's wrong, of course. But then I understand. I've come to understand where they're coming from because I don't. I would say the same thing if I thought Paul was teaching what most of Christianities think he's teaching. It seems, or although people are inconsistent about it when you press them on it. But yeah, you would think that some Christians, a large group of Christians, and I'm not saying this just to disparage anybody. I just mean like it's just the facts that a lot of Christians would say Paul brought a new thing, like, and that's true to a degree. But yeah, actually, I came up with kind of like a problem for that view earlier today, and I meant to do a thing on it with John 14. But like, if you think about it, all the apostles, I know not Paul, of course, but like the disciples are being taught by Jesus. Like, so how does that work? Paul comes along and it's a different thing than what Jesus taught, and then the guys that are become apostles that were disciples, it's like I don't see any conversation saying anything about Jesus' teaching not being applicable anymore. And then just the way Christians in general, like they'll say, well, that's not for us, but then they'll like argue that Jesus is teaching like Paul, like they think Paul is. Um, you know, on some things he says, and then other things he says, well, that's not for us. It's like, well, which is it? Are you going to reconcile it or not? Like, don't say that they're different, but then argue that Jesus is teaching that sort of thing. Did he teach him? I mean, he told John how to go to heaven, right? In John 14, he's telling his disciples, like, I'm going to come back for you. You can't come where I'm going. That's a really interesting fact too. Like in John 13, he's saying like, where I'm going, you can't come. And Peter's like, no, I'll come for you. And that's when he tells him like the cock will crow 3 times, right? That he'll deny him. So like it shifts. He's like saying, what do you mean I can't go where you're going? And then he's kind of like, and then Peter's like, no, why can't I go with you? I'll do whatever it takes or whatever. And then Jesus kind of shifts it to like, you're gonna like deny me 3 times. And like, well, I mean, does that mean Peter had to be saved under the old covenant because Jesus is teaching him how to be saved under the old covenant? And now it's a different thing. I mean, like, it doesn't make any sense. If you get what I'm saying. I'm not being very clear, but
yeah, why would he defend it? Yeah, why would he defend it so much and then say it's done away with? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, he doesn't change. He gives no indication that like, because Jesus is talking about that, and then Jesus tells him you're going to deny me, but that's going to be okay or whatever, right? And then, but if you actually tie that with what he was saying, he's like, where I'm going, you can't come. He was like talking about his impending death, and then he goes on to say in John 14, like, it's like, but I go to prepare a place for you, and I'll come back for you, and like, what does that mean? And then he ends up saying like. Then he ends up saying like you do know the way, but then I take that to mean like by following after his ways or whatever. But it's kind of an interesting thing when you put 13 and 14 together because it seems to me to just suggest that the idea is that Jesus is coming back. I guess everybody believes that anyway. So, but it sounds like he's saying you can't come with me or whatever until I come back for you or whatever is my point. But also that also relates to this idea about Jesus teaching the disciples. Was he training his disciples to give the gospel or not? It doesn't make sense.
And the gospels weren't even written yet, so what gospel are they preaching? And he specifically told the 140, don't tell them I'm the Messiah. Yeah, good luck explaining that to the New Testament only people.
what do you think about that, B.S. Lewis? Like, do you see what I'm saying? Like Jesus is like, certainly Jesus is like, he's going to the Jews or whatever while he's preaching or whatever, but he's called his disciples, and then they end up becoming the apostles that spread the early church to the Gentiles. Like, was all that like, oh, never mind, now Paul's going to come in randomly, like nobody knows he did, all they know is that he didn't live with Jesus like they did, and then he's just saying he had a vision or whatever. Like, to think that it would just be a new thing all of a sudden, and like everybody just follows after Paul now that was taught by Jesus, it just doesn't make sense. What would you
Well,
say
before he answers real quick, Peter did have a point in Acts 2, I think 1, whatever, that the Psalms say there will be 12, and that's the reason Peter thought there needed to be a 12th. But yeah, I think Paul is that 12th, of course. But no, go ahead.
Are you guys fans of Bart Ehrman? Not fans, or?
Yeah, I actually am to a large degree. Like, on some stuff, obviously, I don't agree with him on some stuff, but like, yeah, I think he's has good scholarship. Yeah, I mean, to a degree in certain areas, right? I like some of his stuff. In other words, yeah.
Yeah, he has a book called Lost Christianities where he does a historical deep dive on the different sects of Christianity that was spurred right out the gate. And so Pauline Christianity obviously won the day because that was the major type of Christianity that ended up being adopted by the Roman Empire, but that was like 400, AD. So hundreds of years of development. But at the very beginning, the Ebionites was a sect of Christianity that were really fighting against Paul and his sect, and they were more kind of in line with the Hebrew roots idea, more Judaism, following the law. They're saying Paul's the Antichrist because he's teaching against the law. And so there's a lot of different, like the landscape of Christianity from the very get-go is pretty diverse, but you don't get that narrative from the Bible because you're just getting the Christianity that won the day.
Well, I'd say this, like, what I understand about him, I've watched a lot of his lectures, and I haven't read that book though, but I've asked him questions in interviews and stuff. So like, don't let me give the wrong impression. Like, I disagree with him on a lot of really important things. But like, I have to respect his scholarship, and like, there's a few things he teaches on that I agree with that kind of go against the grain that I actually agree with. So obviously I'm going to appreciate that, right? Because like, he is respected as just a scholar in general, but like, and it's kind of like whatever your foundational belief is about the faith at a certain level is going to affect like what you presume. Like, he's kind of arguing for like that all these Gnostic sects and different quote unquote, Orthodox, condemned groups or whatever are just as equally valid, potential versions of Christianity as the rest. And I would disagree with that, of course. But some of the stuff he talks about is true about the history, like the Marcionites. I've heard him talk about them and stuff. And, that's like so I would say, in other words, I would say that he, some of that stuff's interesting and worth knowing or whatever, and is good or whatever. But I don't think his stuff about like the validity of the scripture is right, and those kind of debates. But I kind of forgot what I was going to say. So
yeah, I'm not asking about that stuff because like with Ehrman, he's going to cite his sources, and so you'll be able to look at what he's looking at, and so you're going to look at some of these ancient texts that are coming from the Ebionite camp and see what they say about Paul for him yourself, and you'll see that it isn't this like the only inkling in the Bible that I think you get is in one of the letters of Peter, where he kind of sort of vouches for Paul, and he says, he preaches the same gospel as us, but he's so confusing that he leads tons of people to destruction.
Well, it says some things that Paul's written are hard to understand, and some twist his writings to their own destruction, and then that's what you're thinking of. And then, so is what I wanted to say about that is like, I believe that it wasn't as confused as he would make it sound. Although, so I would say the early church did, in fact, put Paul and Christ and didn't mix that up in the earliest, especially the first few hundred years, for sure. They didn't mess up this idea, except for the few heretical groups that we see being condemned. They didn't, and like the Marcionites and Valentinius and all that, those groups, and the Ebionites or whatever to some degree. And there's extreme versions kind of on both ends of the spectrum too going on. But during the first century and before and after. But I would say the early church as a whole, that, in the churches that we have the ante-Nicene fathers coming, being bishops over and things like that. I think they were pretty good on these, and something I've been studying recently, that they rightfully put Paul and Jesus as being, preaching the same ideas.
Yeah, I guess just read it for yourself. I'm trying to get way back to the roots of it, the very beginning, because once we're talking Valentinians and Marcians, we're already a couple of 100 years into the future. I want to
Sure, but they reflect what seems to be condemned in the actual New Testament to some degree, right? We see the traces of the Gnostic ideas in there anyway.
Well, you have to kind of understand what they're reading too, because they're not reading the same Bible you are. The very first Bible that we have, that's actually a codified version, is the Sinaiticus, and it also includes Hermes and what's the other one? Barnabas. And so right off the bat,
that's true. I think they only had the Septuagint for a while, right? And then even in the earliest church fathers, like in the first 150, 200 years, I think they only had so many letters of the New Testament. I know that's true too. So
yeah, well, they had extra ones too, like Hermes.
Yeah.
Hermes and Barnabas are, nobody's even heard of them modern day Christianity unless you're like a Bible geek like us. And then you look into it and you're like, what the hell? If you read Barnabas, if anybody's read Barnabas, it's weird. It's weird.
Yeah.
It's weird.
There's translations issues with those, with our English versions of those. I was recently looking into that, studying it too. Yeah. Some issues with that. So like and then that becomes kind of like entrenched in the minds of, and I don't even know if these contested translations of certain things are legitimate for sure or not. But like I looked at it, and they make a case for it. But I'm not a Greek scholar, so I can't be sure how legitimate it is. I'd have to have somebody look at it for me. But like. So that's contested as far as like Hermes. I know some of the things that's said in there. There are people who contest the English translation that everybody uses as far as like certain, because like for me, like if somebody who is taught by Paul directly or taught by John directly, like said the commandments are not valid anymore, like that's a huge problem for me. And that would be evidence that something went astray very quickly. Because if I don't believe any of the New Testament writers would have been saying like, don't keep the Sabbath. I don't think that's legit.
Yeah, I don't know. But the point that Bart's trying to make in Lost Christianity is that all these early sects are already working with different documents to begin with. When it comes to New Testament, I think the Old Testament's already been codified to an effect that most of them are sharing the majority of the Old Testament that we're all reading today. But when it comes to New Testament, because there's a 3rd Corinthians floating around there, there's tons of the Gospel of Peter.
Yeah. That's contested, isn't it? Is the early book?
My point is Peter's one of the earliest Gospels we have, but I don't know why it never made it into the canon. But the thing is that I think Peter's earlier than John is.
Yeah, it could be. I'm not sure.
But
take your word for it.
This is one of my research things. When I went out, it was like I started to really study the canonization process and trying to grasp and get my mind around what those first century followers were actually looking at, because they're getting a lot of word of mouth, preaching from itinerant preachers, but they're also sharing letters, but they're not sharing the same letters.
Right. First Thessalonians, Corinthians, a few of Paul's letters he wrote maybe in prison or whatever, the Ephesians, Galatians, Colossians, and it seems like it's kind of contested on the Gospels or whatever. But what's more important to me is what came down from the apostles to the early church or not,
And that's where we're severely hurt in a modern day, because we don't really have anything from it in the 12. We have a majority of the New Testament's made up from Paul. We have a couple of things from Peter, which are said to be forgeries. We also have a Jude, which he wasn't an apostle. And we have basically that's it when it comes to the 12. Like, we don't have anything.
He asked, would you consider yourself a mythicist?
No, I'm not a mythicist.
That's good.
Good luck saying that 3 times fast.
I think they make strong cases, but I think as the same thing for trying to prove that no God exists, it's really hard, and the standard is really high to prove that no historical figure actually existed. So it is more comfortable to me to say that there is a historical Jesus, but a bunch of legend was based around him. So it's easier for me to say that.
Well, I tell you what, that's one of the reasons I don't totally or why I like some of Bart Ehrman's stuff is because I loved watching him and what's his name, the mythicist guy. Mythicist just means, for anybody who doesn't know, it just means somebody who believes Jesus didn't actually exist. Like they
Richard Carrier.
Jesus.
Yeah, he also debated Price too.
That's who I meant when he debates Price. Matt Dillahunty hosts him and Price. I love that. I love that debate.
Yeah, Price is smart. Price has an imagination, but like I said, I think the standard of proving somebody to not exist, especially when we have a decent amount of evidence, like suggesting they might, is a really high bar. It's you're trying to prove like capital P there is no God at all, which is a really hard thing to do too.
So can I ask you, like, as far as the Gospels we have in their Greek translations, do you just not think there's any reason to trust them, or do you think they might be wrong in some places, but overall trustworthy?
I'm naturalist, so I would Thomas Jefferson the crap out of it. I'd cut out all the miraculous stuff, but for people and places, I don't really. There's no point in me like throwing a fit about that. So no.
Yeah, so you think they're fairly legitimate as far as coming down, but right, I hear you. As far as the that stuff goes, it's just
Well,
okay.
It's tough to tell because I've studied enough extra biblical texts to understand that there is like this certain art form to religious writing, that there is like an element of story weaving involved. And so, especially with the Bible, like names mean things. So I don't know if some of these people actually existed or they're just using the names of these people because these names mean certain things that prop up the story they're trying to tell. Does that make sense? Like Emmanuel is prophesied to be Jesus, right? But then I say, hey, his name's not Emmanuel. I'm like, oh, well, it means God with us. And I'm like, yeah, but his name's not Emmanuel, it's Jesus. And it's like, well, it means God with us.
Right, that's kind of a contested thing, and like scholars don't even know what to do with that. It seems like really like or what the intent of the author is with that sort of thing. Like should we transliterate it? Are their names that really their original names? Are they just like you said, right? I did a little stream on this too in the Demos with CJ the other day. You should watch that. We were just going over like the different possibilities of that stuff or how we should think of that sort of thing. Like, because it's rather interesting how the different stories. The guy, some of them are questionable as far as that goes or whatever. Like, but the names meaning what their lives seem to like experience or whatever, and you see that even in the Old Testament and the New. So it's weird.
It's really prominent in the Old Testament for sure, and then the New kind of does it a little bit and it gets away with it. And so that's where I kind of like toss up like, was this person a historical person or not? Because like even in Hosea's kids from the prostitute wife or whatever, God tells him to name the kids like the worst names ever. It's like, you're a big doo-doo head, and that's the kid's name. And it's like, who would want to have that?
I declare you Lewis.
Yeah, it's like, I don't remember exactly what they are, but they're really bad. Like, you've brought shame on all our people, and that's your name, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, well, that's a sucky name, dude.
God is not with you.
Yeah.
Can I ask another question, Lewis?
What's that?
I wanted to ask Lewis, let's say God, let's just, I know you're an atheist or naturalist, but let's say God did exist. Would you think that if God did exist, the salvific system Jesus taught would be like something you could buy into?
I would have to if God existed, because that would be his system. Like, if I had no doubt that God existed, then he was the Christian God, then I'd have to play by his rules.
Wow, good answer.
Well, unless hell is a thing, and if maybe Rebecca's right, and annihilation's a thing, maybe
Rebecca is right.
I'll still be stubborn and be like, well, I'm putting my foot down. I think that human sacrifice is immoral, no matter what the circumstances. Like.
Well, I guess my question was, even if God exists, it's not necessarily the case that we have to assume Jesus was a real prophet. But looking at what Jesus said, could you think that, you know, his system would be something that you would find, you know, beneficial and good for society?
Well, explain to me what you mean by his system.
Like the fact that you have to like love everyone in order to be right with God.
That's
Like,
not his system. He says hate your family.
well, I think that's in the context of, if not necessarily just hating them just like because he's commanding you to do that, but if they're kind of, the way I look at that is if they're separating you or restricting you from accepting what Jesus teaches. So like, yeah, if Jesus teaches the way to salvation is what he's saying, and your family opposes you, you know, you're going to have to make the choice at that point. He just doesn't want people to hate their families.
Except for it never like really explicitly states that. It's what you're doing is you're harmonizing. You have two seemingly contradicting verses, like love your enemies and hate your family, and you're trying to make sense in your brain.
I think what he says is, if you either love me, you can't love me. Wait, how does he exactly put it? It's something about how you can't love Jesus unless you hate your family, or something along those lines. I can't remember what it was.
Real quick, I want to, since you honored me with your presence on and came on there, I want to let you give a shout out to your channel real quick and tell everybody about it, if you don't mind, or if you want to.
Yeah, a quick shout out. I am a little learning to do animation, and I do a little Photoshop, and I make some pretty blasphemous cartoons. So I don't know how much of your audience might actually like it, but it's actually thoughtful too. That first
You don't
one
do
is.
Amy Newman's, do you? Do you do Amy Newman's memes? Those are hilarious. That last one, did you see that last one? The church tilted up. It was an old barn church, and it was tilted up in the air, and it had a stick underneath it. And it says, "Don't! It's a trap."
Oh wow!
No.
Oh yeah, go ahead and let him plug his channel real quick, and then we'll go back to the conversation. I just want to do that.
So I have done art all my life, but I've never done animation, and so whatever you're seeing on my channel is you seeing me actually learn to animate real time. And that first series right there, I Had Too Much Faith to Be a Christian, is a play off of Frank Turek's book, and it's just B.S. Lewis as a character gullibly meandering his way out of the faith by making a bunch of stupid faith-based decisions. And each episode's based on some of the common memes that Christians give for why non-Christians leave the faith, like I just wanted to sin, or I didn't have a real relationship with God, or any of that stuff. So
That's funny, Rebecca, that one. It's moist robots. Okay, well, enough blasphemy, but continue. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, thanks. And to get back from us, I don't really know what Jesus's system is. It's what, if you listen earlier in the chat, we're talking about Christian pluralism was one of my steps on the way out, is I don't know how to define true Christianity from false Christianity.
Well, I think one definition that might work is it kind of one that I use is just look at what, and I know you'll dispute that what we have is what Jesus actually taught, but if you just look at the New Testament as we have it and just look at what Jesus taught, I don't think you can go wrong. So, you know, like people get confused with Paul and some of the other epistles. Like, my opinion is, you know, we have what Jesus taught. So just looking at what he said.
So you're asking if I'm just reading the Gospels in general and ignoring the rest, kind of thing?
Not necessarily ignoring them, but just using them as kind of like more commentary as opposed, or clarification as opposed to the original source.
Yeah, well, I think there is hit and miss with Jesus's teachings. I don't think not giving any care for the morrow is a good rule of thumb to live by. And so if I was to read that and, you know, look at the birds and the nests and he takes care of everybody, so why do you worry about tomorrow? I don't think that's good to live by. But loving your neighbor, I don't know if loving your enemy is an absolute statement that's always good, though. because loving your enemy can get you dead quick.
Well, you can love your enemy and still react to them, attacking you or being aggressive towards you. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's say, you can love someone who wants to hurt you, and even if you can respond to them in ways that are defensive to yourself in a loving way.
Have you ever known anybody who's in an abusive relationship before?
I mean, I've known people like
physically abusive, I'm talking.
Like a girl who's in a bad relationship with a guy or something.
Like Stockholm syndrome problems.
Or just he beats the shit out of her, and then she just keeps coming back because she feels so worthless, and that she only finds her worth in her relationship with him, and then she just keeps coming back to the same cycle of violence over and over and over.
I mean, not that bad, but I know those types of relationships exist. Yeah, that does happen.
But would you consider the boyfriend or husband an enemy or not? I don't know what we're classifying him as.
He is at that point, yeah. But so the question is, I guess you're gonna ask, how should the girl respond or feel towards him?
Yeah, because when I hear love, like, I'm a nerd. My mom got me hooked on the 5 Love Languages book. You ever heard of that?
I've never read it.
Yeah, I have. Yeah,
it's like a touchy-feely book, but it's like gifts, physical touch. What's the other ones? Quality time, acts of service, and there's one more. And so, like, people express love in usually 2 of those ways as their major ones, but a fully loving relationship will kind of always encompass all 5 of those. And so if I'm thinking about the abusive man and the abused woman, if she's fearing physical touch or feeling like coerced to physical touch, and then like he's using gifts as manipulation tools, or like, these things can always go wrong. And so it's always a question of like, well, is it really love at that point? Like,
Well, yeah, this is another guy came on to Jamie's show yesterday and was talking about how he left religion because of how people in religion had treated him. And my always response is, well, that's not the religion's fault. That's human nature. We're sinners, and just because we're in a religion doesn't mean we're gonna act perfectly or even act good or be good people. So you can't look at the behavior of people and say that, religion is at fault for that. I don't know. Was that kind of a direct response to your question?
I was just addressing the teaching of Jesus to love your enemy and how that actually plays out in the real world.
So I would say love is defined by the commandments. And then that's like the baseline of like, like it doesn't describe everything about loving. It's not, they're just like, you can't love without and lie to somebody. You can't love and obviously hurt them, murder them. You wouldn't covet after their things. You wouldn't. And so that's like a baseline. And then of course, how that plays out is in a lot of the New Testament or whatever, the fruits of the Spirit or the Beatitudes, stuff like that. Like, but it all comes down to putting the other person above yourself. And so to me,
well, can I interject though? I would disagree. Like my mom is really old and she's on her way out soon. I don't think I'd have a problem telling her I still believe in God. It would be a lie, but it would not cause her undue anguish on her way out to think that she won't see me again.
Okay, well, I think that's perfectly fine, and so that's actually what I was going to say earlier, is because I think, I'm not positive on that, but I think it's probably a good idea to lie to Nazis, that whole thing about if they're hiding under your door, under your floorboards or whatever, because this came up last night too, but I was just going to say, like, it's not that hard, like, just because you find like a circumstance where like keeping the commandment doesn't make sense, like, I think it's like a default. Like, if you love somebody, it's like you should never divorce. Well, but if the husband's beating the crap out of the wife and her life's at risk, obviously that she should get away from him. in light of the fact that divorce is bad in like general, you know.
Here's the way I look at it. We need to view, no matter what horrible thing people are doing, ultimately they're doing it because they're violating their nature. So we need to love them at the deepest level while recognizing the wrong that they're doing at the level of their behavior. That's kind of how I view it.
Are you talking love, like value them as a human being type of thing, or what do you mean?
Right. Like there's different types of love in the Greek language, and the one that Jesus spoke of is agape, which is kind of general concern for other people's welfare.
Yeah, but if someone's hitting on me, I'm not concerned for their welfare. I'm concerned for my welfare because I'm in immediate danger.
Right, and you can recognize that the fact that they're a threat to you while viewing them as having dignity as human beings. So, like, I guess the most extreme example was someone's trying to murder you. Like, can you love someone who's in the process of trying to murder you? And it's really, it'd probably be really hard, but yeah, that's what we're commanded to do. And it doesn't mean we can't defend ourselves. It doesn't mean we can't kill the person in self-defense. It just means we have to love them.
But that's weird. Like, oh, I wish I had the video. There's this one preacher who gave like a sing-songy sermon where he was talking about like Jesus strangling people while like loving them, and he was like hugging on himself. I don't remember. It was so weird. But I saw that video. I was like, that kind of helped ease me out of Christianity, because it just seemed like that was really confused. Like this guy was like talking about Jesus enacting his vengeance while hugging people and loving on them. I was like, this is so freaking weird.
Have you seen the one where the pastor's like telling the stories, like this kid, I was doing this,
punch him in the chest.
Yeah, I just went over and I just went, oof, and I knocked him right down and knocked the air out of him. He's like a 12-year-old kid, like a grown man. Like, you got to get serious about Jesus. And I was just like, whoa, bro.
Yeah, A from us, no offense, but the stuff you're talking right now reminds me of like justifying this kind of abuse stuff. And I'm not trying to hold it against you, but I think it's a cognitive dissonance when we have contradictory terms
I'm
from the
laughing,
Bible.
but it's I mean, that's a weird one, because it's like, what to say about it?
Well,
I guess it was wrong, you know.
The way I think, just the way you have to look at it is when he's saying love, it's not like tolerate what people are doing if it's wrong. It's like, it's how you see them as human beings with dignity. But you don't have to, like, if you're a woman in an abusive relationship and you're commanded to love the guy who's being abusive, it's not meaning like, oh, you have to stay with him and continue to be subservient to him. No, it's not saying that. It's a general. It's about how we view all human beings in principle.
Yeah, and I have a problem ascribing value to human beings anyway. It makes me feel like a slave owner type of thing. So I'm like, well, how much are you worth? Well, how much are you worth? Like, what is? I understand we do it subconsciously, but let me take you down another trip down the Old Testament. Like Psalm says, I hate who you hate, God. He says, your enemies are my enemies. And then God gives a list somewhere in Proverbs or Psalms, one of the others, where he has 7 things he does hate, a lying tongue, and et cetera, et cetera. So do you think David is appropriate for hating people with lying tongues because God hates them?
Yeah, these are tough ones, and there are actually passages in the Old Testament where God does explicitly say he hates certain groups of individuals. And I've heard people trying to figure out how to deal with this, and some of it is the way I look at it is it's poetic language. It's not necessarily, it's like hyperbolic poetic language that doesn't really, like, it's hard to explain, but it's meant to be interpreted literally, but not literally. You know what I'm saying?
So does God hate or not hate a lying tongue?
Like, if you read the passage,
I hate liars, but I don't necessarily hate persons who lie. So I don't know. That's how I look at it. So, like,
well,
I hate it when people lie.
Yeah.
it's kind of like, okay, if you look at the word, just the word, and yeah, it does say hate, but I think there's a sense in which it just means that, God is displeased with these groups of people and doesn't actually hate them, because if you look at how this poetic wisdom literature works, there's a lot of exaggerate. Like sometimes, like God says, "I will utterly destroy the nation of Israel." Okay, well, He didn't utterly destroy it. He chastened it. So it's like there's exaggeration. It's like you don't have to interpret it as God literally hating people. I don't think.
Well, the lying part sounds like it's continuous, like a drunkard versus a drunk, a lying tongue versus a tongue that lied once to his, baseball team or something. Sounds like a continuous lying.
Yeah, points to anybody in the chat if you could find that. It's Proverbs or Ecclesiastes or one of those things, but it says 6 things I abhor, 7 things I hate. And then he lists off 7 things, and it does list people in the group. I can't remember all of them specifically, but
well, he blatantly says he hates Esau or the other guy, one of the two. I mean, he blatantly says he hates that one kid that
from his
tried
womb,
he snuck out first. The other guy was supposed to go first, but he butted ahead, and that's why the other guy had him by the heel. He was trying to pull him back, but he already snuck out first. He snuck out. He stole the inheritance that way. Coming out of the womb. That's why God hated him. But yeah, no, he blatantly says, I hate this guy. So no, he created evil. He didn't create an evil being equal to him, only opposite. He created evil. There's no reason to blame anything on him. We know the world belongs to somebody else, not the good Lord right now. So
yeah, and I'm not really getting bogged down in the specifics here because we all know that there's specific instances where God hates people. I'm looking more at the mechanism where David says he hates God's enemies, and then let's contrast that to what Jesus says about loving your enemies and how to tell the difference.
I actually found the passage where he talks about hating your mother and father. Do we want to go back to that, or are we moved on from there? Because I kind of wanted to deal with it. I finally found it.
No, you can. I know the common apologetic is love less, but go for it.
Well, it just says it's Matthew 10:37, and it's anyone who loves their father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves their son or so, yeah, it's like, honestly, when it comes to God needs to supersede any human relationship. It's just, if God exists, there's no human relationship that's more important than that. And if it's separating you from God, I think, it makes sense. Now, you have to come to a place where you believe in God to probably believe that, but I think it's consistent.
Sure. And I think Jamie Russell touched on this when I was listening in on another day, is you have 2 commands basically summed up in the New Testament. First is to love God with all your muchness, all your heart, mind, soul, body. And the second is to love others as you love yourself. So here is my technical question, my logistics question for you guys. If I'm loving God with all, capital ALL, of my heart, mind, soul, and body, where's the love for others?
Oh, that would be included.
But what happens when love for God conflicts with love for others?
Oh, like where would that happen?
Well, it's not saying love only God. It's, you can love multiple, entities with all your heart, mind, and soul.
You can only serve one master.
Well, if you love God, you'll love what God loves.
Yeah, I would say that's a summation of the 10 Commandments.
But you'll also hate what God hates then, right?
Yeah.
Which brings me back to the David question. Was David right for hating the enemies of God when Jesus says, love your enemies?
Yeah, that's the whole, the answer to that. I mean, love the sinner and hate the sin until you have to do something about the one,
I I don't know about that though, because
I would look at what I said about the kind of poetic language, the hyperbolic language that's used in the Old Testament wisdom literature. It can be interpreted to not mean literally hate someone.
Yeah, do you
yeah,
hate someone if you have to kill them before your family? I mean, I don't know. I mean, it seems to me like I'm not sure how to exactly articulate it, but
it depends. If I loved God as much as I love my wife, per se, and I felt somebody was really, really my wife's enemy, I would have no problem hating that person and probably doing harm to them if the situation warranted it. But if I'm substituting God for my wife and I'm loving him even more than I love my wife, I would not doubt I would kill somebody for God.
yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's hard to think about. I don't know, Mike. What do you think?
Well, if we all know our 10 Commandments, Exodus 20, is that right?
Yeah,
All right. So where else is it? Leviticus or Deuteronomy 17 or 18 or something?
I don't know what you're looking for.
which verse? I mean, I can show the summation of it in Deuteronomy, like this one. People don't think this through. I think sometimes either is like this.
So if you know the 10 Commandments, I think what's the first one? Love God. What's the
Yeah,
next one?
no
Don't
idols.
make any idols to them or something like that. Have no
Yep.
other gods before them, such like that. But no, Exodus 20. We don't want Exodus. We all know the one from Exodus 20. What is the one in Deuteronomy or Leviticus that essentially repeats it? That's what he says there, but it looks like there's only 7. In Deuteronomy, it looks like there's only 7.
That I'm not sure, but it's
Oh,
interesting. This
let me take a peek here. And thou shalt look. Oh yeah, this is your Shema. Go back one to 6:4. That's your Shema. Shema means hear and obey, like hearken. Hearken would be a good word. There's a lot of songs called sing the Shema, hear the Shema. Yeah, back there, Hear, O Israel. The Lord, you Trinitarians love this. The Lord our God is one Lord, and there's a lot of discussion on this. Okay, but that's what Jesus actually goes over. He says, that isn't the Lord your God is not one. The Lord your God is first. Okay, that's why he was tricked. They were trying to trick him. Jesus, what's the first command? And he gave this, the Deuteronomy 6:4. But these are the commands. Okay, keep going. Lord did talk to them, and thou shalt bind them for a sign, right? And it shall be, and houses full, all the good. No, I don't think. Then beware, the Lord who brought thee. Thou shalt the Lord. We shall. I'll have to look. I'll have to look for it. It gives the 10 commandments. Don't tempt. You shall diligently keep. Oh, here we go. And thou shalt do that which is right and good. Keep going. Swear to cast out of the enemies before, and when thy son hath come saying, then thou shalt say, thy son, we are the Pharaohs. No, this doggone it. It gives the other 10 commandments again in a list, and it shall be covetousness, and you shall love, you shall not tempt. That sure sounds like it.
What's the point you're trying to get at, Mike?
Notice that he says here, will cast out the enemies before thee too. Here, that kind of goes to what BS was saying. Like, didn't Jesus say, "Love your enemies"? This says, "And when thy son asketh thee at the time to come, saying, What mean the testimonies?" Or no, to cast out all thine enemies before thee, as the Lord hath spoken. So maybe that's. I mean, that sounds like what Jesus didn't teach, right? That's what you're saying.
Yeah, kind of. I don't want to stray too much from Ephraim's question to me. Is just when he's asking, does Jesus's teachings and their salvation plan, is it a good thing or a bad thing? I get bogged down in the details, and I'm not trying to be a distractor, but I don't even know what you're meaning when you're saying that kind of stuff.
It almost sounds like you're worried that it's too loving. Is that like it's like will lead to a situation where we hurt ourselves from our love for our excessive love? Is that a problem? Is that kind of what your problem is?
It could be because I am living in the real world, and the real world, we have weapons for a reason. Like the Cold War, Since the Cold War, we've kept a stockpile of nuclear armaments, and it's not even so much as we plan on just blowing the hell out of everybody. It's we want to deter people because we never know for sure if they mean us goodwill or not. And
Let me ask you this. What if everyone followed Jesus' commandments to love each other? Do you think it'd make the world better?
Yeah, that would be heaven, wouldn't it?
All right, so we can agree that if everyone followed his will, the world would be a better place.
Okay, it depends on his things too. Okay, so another one of my troublesome verses is Luke 19:27. I bring it up all the time. Whenever I talk about passionate love and killing, passion killings and stuff like this, like we were just talking about killing for God, people will say, well, what if, God asked me to kill somebody? And a lot of people will say, oh, God will never ask you to kill somebody. And I'm like, well, here's a bunch of places in the Old Testament. He asked people to kill people all the time. I'm like, well, that's Old Testament, Old Covenant, blah, blah, blah. Luke 19:27 is a New Testament verse where he is commanding his followers to kill his enemies, which would be, I'm guessing, non-followers. And so we have a New Testament verse. It's in a parable form from Jesus, but it has a real world connection. All parables do.
Mm-hmm.
Where Jesus,
I've heard Sam Harris quote this and not mention that part.
Yeah, but I don't care if it's a parable, because if we talk about the parable of the sower and the seeds, or we talk about the parable of the minuses, or the whatever Jesus parable we have, we're always looking for the real world connection, right? So we're not oblivious to the fact that there is a real world connection. But whenever this verse comes up, it gets, everybody just totally forgets, that's a parable, that's a parable. I'm like, well, it's a parable, and to me, it sounds like a thinly veiled threat, but it is him as the king, presumably when he returns, saying, believers and followers, go round up all the non-believers and followers, bring them in front of me and slaughter them. And
I found my spot when you're ready. Go ahead, keep going. I found my spot when you're ready. You're on Luke 19:27. I found my spot. Go ahead, continue.
Yeah, just question is if Jesus comes tomorrow, are you guys prepared to round me up and slaughter me?
I don't know. I don't know you well enough.
If he commands it, he's not asking you, he's commanding.
Oh yeah, if he commands it, I'll do it.
Well, that's a problem, right? That's a problem for what the from us worldview is talking
about.
Well,
I would never do it unless he commanded it and he'd return from the sky.
You gotta
how could I not? Wouldn't you kill if he handed you a sword and said it's the end of the world, come into the everlasting kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world? Would you say, no, I can't kill that guy? Well, and he says, well, he is not worthy. He's worthy of death. And it's the creator telling you that? I mean, wouldn't you do it?
It depends who he's asking. What if it's your child and that child is an unbeliever?
Yeah, that would be tough. I don't know. Right.
And so it's not just as easy as some rando on the internet. Oh, I'll go hunt down B.S. Lewis and kill him. Like, sure, okay, I don't know him, but
sure, I'll put a burning freaking, what do you call those things, a cattle iron or whatever?
Yeah, I'll put him on a stake. Old school.
And here.
Hebrew Israelites told me that you're going to be my slave. I don't want to kill him. I need him to work in my field.
I'm a hard worker. Don't kill me.
I swear, I got horns.
Yeah, but and so this verse has always been trouble. Even as a Christian, this verse was troublesome because for pacifist Jesus, this is a big oopsie.
Well, I mean, I would say it's a parable, but I do think Jesus is going to. The people are going to attack him more or less. So I'm not sure what to make of this. I'll have to look at it and get back to you.
Yeah, I ask everybody to think about it.
To answer your question, if I was absolutely ontologically certain that the God of the universe was commanding me to do something, I would do it. I don't care what it is. But again, I'd have to be certain it was coming from God the Creator.
Remember the Sabbath.
Don't mix fabrics.
Yeah. Yeah, that's in the very beginning when I jumped on, we started talking about psychological problems and how to know when attribution errors and when God is really telling you something. So you would have no luck at all in getting 100% epistemic certainty that God is actually telling you that.
Yeah, I don't know how I could be absolutely certain, but assuming I am able to know with absolute ontological certainty, I would do anything God commanded me to do.
What was the verse that he says to kill people?
Luke,
Luke 1927.
That's the end days, of course. He's on the final judgment throne judge. He's speaking of the future.
And I don't care. That's just because some people say the twinkle in an eye verse, and so it'd be like it could happen tomorrow. I know there's a lot of eschatological foreplay that has to happen in a lot of people's minds, but there's also verses like twinkle of an eye that makes people believe that it could happen any day now.
I don't think that's a speed thing. I think that's a lust thing that'll draw you away from the good Lord, and the twinkling of your eye twinkling at a married woman sort of thing.
Well, I think that's applied to at the last trump in the twinkling of an eye. I think it has to do with the instantaneousness of the believer being changed who's alive at that time. So I don't think that's applied to like the pre-tribulation rapture that could happen at any moment. I think it's just talking about the quickness that the change comes when of being transformed. If I remember that verse correctly, it's 2 Corinthians 4:16 or something, 3:16.
Yeah, and then we're going to get into a lot of eschatological fights about pre-trib, post-trib, mid-trib, all that stuff. But the individual has to make all these decisions on the fly, because we're saying if Jesus just shows up and he says, this is the third trumpet, and you're like, what? And he's like, it's all metaphorical. Don't worry about it, but just go kill him. It's like,
I would say all the verses like Matthew 13 and such, like the one left is the believer, and the angels are gathering the ones in judgment. So I actually do think people die at Jesus coming, but I also think the final throw of the lake of fire is after the 1,000 years. But yeah, we don't need to go down that road.
No,
but Mike, you had a verse you wanted to bring up.
Oh, I'm loving the pictures the brothers posting.
I know. Look at that dead giant.
Our Exodus 20. We don't turn to Exodus 20. We're going to go to Leviticus 19. But we all know our.
That's what I had on the screen. I just had it on the screen.
I think we did Deuteronomy.
No, I changed it to Leviticus 19.
Oh, so yeah, 19 verses 1 through 18.
Yeah, that's where the love your neighbor is mentioned too.
Well, the verse 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and all in between cover the 10 commandments.
Yeah.
You might get freaked out that it says something about don't eat stuff sacrificed on the third day, but within 17 verses, he's covering the 10 commandments, and that's what Jesus is quoting. That's what he's exactly quoting. That Deuteronomy 6:4, which is the first command of the combined three.
Yeah.
But it's called the first command because it contains the word first. But no, this Leviticus, and then he's ending it. He's saying, and then he's ending it with Leviticus 1, whatever it is, 19:17 here, 18. Yeah. And he says all of the commands hang on those two commands. When the love your neighbor as yourself is actually two commands. So that's why he's saying, that's why they're trying to trick him. What's the first command? And he says, "Hear, O Israel," the Deuteronomy 6:4, Yahovah, your Elohim is first, because it contains the word first. And he says, and the two command is like unto this: love your neighbor as yourself. There's two commands within one command. He's making a statement on what we think is like God is one. Why are you going to tell the Israelites, a Unitarian people, that their Father is one? It's Eshad. It's the exact same word used on day one, or when you're married to your wife. No, and it can mean one. It can mean unity. It can mean first. But no, in this particular instance, this doesn't hurt your little Trinitarian thing. He's saying this specific Deuteronomy 6:4 is that Yahovah comes first. Is all I wanted to point out.
Yeah, I just don't want to get too separated from what A from us was talking about. Do you have any thoughts, A from us, when for what you were saying in regards to Luke 19:27 and the moral aspects of that?
I mean, it sounds like to me you've already kind of seen how I would respond, which is that yes, it's a parable. The ultimate lesson we're supposed to learn from this is that we need to use the gifts of God for the benefit of mankind. And I think the slaughter at the end is kind of what is a metaphor of, our judgment for not doing good works in this world. That's kind of how I interpret it.
But
But you
he's
know how to.
specifically asking his followers to enact his judgment in that parable, which is different than a Revelations or Revelation type verse, And so psychologically, stick with me here. Everything goes your way. We're all living for Christ. Some people are not, because we need some enemies to slaughter still. But we all become loving pacifists, just like, I love you, you love me, we're a happy family. And then Jesus pops up on the scene, boom, here's a group of people, go kill them. Like,
No, there's a 1,000-year reign. Oh my goodness, where they get to learn.
Yeah,
We get a door slammed in our face. We get a door slammed in our face. The door slammed in our face is not the lake of fire. If we don't go to visit him once a year, it won't rain on us. We get 1,000 years to learn about him.
I'm just talking about like physical death on the earth and stuff.
I see what you mean. I agree. It could potentially be interpreted in a way that justifies violence. I won't deny that. But I don't think that's the proper interpretation.
But you do agree that we just handing out Bibles to anybody on the street, they could read this that way and get zealous and hurt somebody, right?
That could happen. That could happen. But again,
Yeah,
I don't.
How about Rainbow Six or whatever too? We sell those. Are you anti-video games too?
No.
Okay. I guess people aren't as devoted to that though. You could say, right? Something like that.
Yeah,
I'm not trying to be a dick.
No, there's always a difference when anybody makes comparisons like this, like, well, it's video games or Mein Kampf or another book or whatever. The difference is it becomes very much more important when you think God wrote it. If you thought God made Rainbow Six, you might have more of an inkling to actually go out and enact Rainbow Six, but you don't, because it's just a video game made by men.
You support our troops? Do you support our troops?
Yes, I support our troops.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's a tough one, and there's a couple others in there. I can't think of them offhand, but I mean, I can see how you're right that, and I'm sure it has happened in history where people use this. I mean, it's not exactly a secret that Christians actually did things like this in history. So,
yeah, and from personal experience, deep in my psychosis states, I use this verse as a justification for if I had to hurt somebody, I would just say God, or I would reason myself into thinking that God wanted that person hurt.
I blame the Jews.
That they're an easy target.
I'm just kidding. Well, I mean, I blame the Pope.
But I can't honestly answer your question, from us, that I think Christianity would make the world better when I have these things lingering around. Like, to me, when people just decide to hand out Bibles at hotels and to homeless people and just spread them around,
that's okay. Come on.
It seems a little haphazardous, especially when you're saying, well, this is the word of God, this is the word of God. And then now that we're having a discussion, we're always talking about, well, it's about the deeper interpretations and it's about the proper exegesis. And it's like your average kid or your average homeless person or your average mentally disabled person might not be able to grasp the proper exegesis.
Well, it's about space babies and, and who knows what else. But, it's done. So you think it's done more damage than good? Is that what you're saying?
I am an anti-theist. I think all belief in the supernatural is a net harm for humanity than a net benefit. So yeah,
you're too smart for that. You're too smart for that, man.
History proves him true. Don't disagree with him. History proves it true.
No, it doesn't. Is the problem?
60 million, 600 million dead because of Christianity. Come on, is that the right way to go? Are you kidding me?
No, let me clarify. I didn't say zero harm or zero benefit. It's a net for me. It's more harm than good.
I'd pass out TC before I pass out a Bible.
Well, I think ultimately it's based on, what's true, because, people will use what's true to justify evil actions. Like I've seen people who killed others to cull them from the evolutionary gene pool, their genes out. So if you assume evolution's true, there are people who have murdered others based on the desire to remove them from the gene pool. So,
And
just because.
I think we've tried to get away from eugenics as a whole. I know we've tested it out and Nazis did it and stuff like that, and we're not actively on a large scale doing it now, to my knowledge. So we've corrected, for now at least.
No need. We're making our men women.
But what I'm saying is, I guess what I'm trying to get at is, we have to look. We can't judge, whether we believe something on whether it's ultimate, even if it's beneficial or not. It's ultimately just whether it's true or not.
Yeah.
So
that's exactly why I think supernatural belief is hard, because is harmful, because there is no verification process for it. So I could tell you that there's a demon sitting right next to you right now, and you just have to take my word for it or not. There's no way for you to find out for yourself if a demon is in fact sitting next to you.
Well, I mean, let's be honest, there are some big problems with naturalism too. This is why when I talk to people, like, one question I ask is, do you think you'd be open to being like a general kind of deist or a theist and just kind of rejecting man-made religions? Why doesn't that appeal to you?
Deism is the most appealing origin story from a supernatural angle to me, and if I'm living like an atheist, that would be the same as if I'm living like a deist, so it doesn't really change the here and now for me.
But so let's say there's some God that is concerned with humanity and their actions, but just, all of the religions kind of got it wrong because of our, whatever, our ignorance. Like, you realize that's a possibility, right?
Yeah, and unless that deity has a way to communicate clearly with me what he expects, then I should have no moral standing to follow what he expects if he can't communicate it to me.
So in Christianity, there's the concept of general revelation and special revelation. So do you think like the universe could be like a giant sign from God that there's something greater? You don't see any sign of a mind at work behind creation?
No.
See, I think that's where you have a lot of problems.
Well, it's just an intuition on your part. It's an intuition on my part, but there's no way to verify either way until you die and find out there's a God.
Well, I think if you're a naturalist, there are ways to kind of demonstrate the probability of that from a mathematical scientific perspective.
No, there's not.
Well, there is, because you can look at things as they are, and there are, people who developed mathematical probabilities of what is the chance this could have happened if it was just no intelligent activity, and the chances are not.
Wait, what's Mike doing? Don't take your pants off, Mike.
No, he's showing his Zeet seats.
Okay, I thought he was going to an OnlyFans show.
No, so this is an interesting verse. There's a scene where God commands them to put the Zeet seat on the hem of their garment because they killed a guy who was making a fire on the Sabbath, and it says, "It shall be unto you for a tassel, that you may look upon it and remember all the commandments of the Lord and do them, and seek not after your own heart and your own eyes, after which you use to go a whoring."
A whoring.
Yeah. And then in Zechariah 8, it says, there's a prophecy in Zechariah 8 that says, "Thus saith the Lord of hosts, in those days it shall come to pass that 10 men shall take hold out of all languages of the nations. Even shall they take hold of the tassel of him that is a Jew, saying, we will go with you, for we have heard that God is with you." That's a prophecy. I think that's interesting.
And all the people said amen.
Yeah.
So sorry, A, from us. I didn't mean to. I just, when I see a guy playing with his belt, I get distracted.
Yeah, I was wondering.
I couldn't see in the stupid camera. I'm so sorry. I'm like, where's the camera on this dumb old thing? No, carry on, brothers.
So I will tell you right now, I'm pretty decent with probabilities myself. And what you're suggesting, I don't care how low of a naturalistic probability you're saying for proteins forming or whatever, we have no way to even calculate a supernatural probability to compare it to. So you believe all things are possible with God, that gives you a probability of 1 over infinity, which is an abstract number, which is not a real probability. So if I'm going to try to put a less than, greater than, or equal to sign in between the two probabilities to compare them, I can't even start to do the equation because the supernatural probability hasn't even been able to establish itself. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah. Let me give you a bridge though from the calculations, the probabilities to this is why I believe an intelligent being did this. Because how would you respond to someone who said, well, we know that, you know, improbable things won't happen by chance, but they're much more likely if intelligent agents are arranging things this way. You know, is that not logical to you?
No, because what if you see a cloud that looks like a bunny? Do you think somebody arranged the cloud to look like a bunny, or do you think that's you interpreting the cloud to look like a bunny?
Point.
I got one for you. Follow me here for a second. Do you tell me if this is if this meets the standard of this is kind of weird, okay, and I'm not like making a big deal of it, but it's like a standard. There is a point, right, where like enough coincidences would be like kind of interesting to like make you stop and think, right? As far as like probabilities go, right?
Okay.
Sorry, you go ahead and you guys go keep talking. I interrupted you. Sorry, Anthony. Just go ahead and keep going.
No, Danny. Yeah, like, well, if you have something to respond, just go
Well,
ahead.
I think it's an interesting thing to just ponder for a second here. Like I'll show you. Okay, so like if you don't know how well anybody knows Daniel, but it's contested that it's prophetic, right? Like or not. Some people say it's a later date, like 200 BC or 600 BC, and in Daniel 8, it's going to the two empires, right? Of
Jamie?
Babylon. Yeah.
Jamie, technical
Yes.
thing here. Are you on Google Maps? You might be using a lot of energy. You're starting to crackle. As soon as you went to that map, you started to crackle.
Okay. Well, yeah. Let me take it off for a second. Let's do this. So let me know if you're not hearing me, but I'll just read. I want to read you part of Daniel 8. It's widely accepted. Everybody has the same interpretation that it's explaining the succession of kingdoms, and it says so the vision, I was beside a canal. I looked up, and there before me was a ram with 2 horns standing beside the canal. The horns were long. One of the horns was longer than the other, but grew up later. I watched the ram as it charged towards the west. Okay, just take my word for it. Everybody believes this is the succession of kingdoms. This is Medo-Persia after Babylon. So like most non-believing scholars are going to say it's written in 200, so it's after the fact, which they knew that Medes and Persians, everybody accepts that was who beat Babylon, right? And that's when Daniel's writing this in 600, if you believe that, or it's just written after the fact, right, by somebody else. But everybody agrees, whether they're scholars are unbelieving scholars or believing scholars. We know that this ram with the 2 horns, one bigger than the other, makes sense too, because the Medes were a little country and their Persia's the bigger portion of that empire that came in and defeated Babylon. It's just widely accepted. No one really disputes it. Okay. So here's where Iran is, where the Medes the Medes were. Can you see? I'm not sharing. Am I? Sorry. Let me share it again. I just want to hear what you think of this. Just seems weird to you or not. Some people tell me I'm just retarded, and then other people are like, yeah, that's kind of weird. So Medes and Persians were right in this region here. Let's see, right in here where it says Tehran and in this area, Iran. Basically, the greater part of Iran is Persia, Persia, and then the Medes were up slightly to the west, up where Tehran is in that area and south of there. Okay, so it's a ram. It's described as a ram with 2 horns, one bigger than the other. Now watch this. Look at this thing on the map here. Do you see it? Or am I retarded? Do you see that right there? Does it look like a ram to you? The ram's head right there? Nope.
It kind of looks like a cow facing. Oh yeah, I see the top.
Yeah, it kind of does.
I see the top. Yeah. So that's the overwhelming coincidence that you're talking
No,
about?
no. So I'm asking, like, this is right in this region of Tehran. I mean, Tehran is where Medes were, and it even says in the text too. I didn't read this part, but it's moving towards the Holy Land, right, Israel, and it actually says in the text that it's moving west and to the north and to the south, and not from the east. So it's moving from the east in all directions, right? And so I just find that really crazy because that like a horn, look at the tip even goes like right, curls up right up to the eye, and there's an eye there and a black streak like on a ram. So like you can even see the other horn there. The mountains are like a horn. You see like it curling over like the large horns or whatever. You get what I'm saying, right?
No, that is cool. I
How
don't
the
know.
heck is that? It uses a ram in that same exact region, moving in the direction it's supposed to. Now, what should we make of that?
Coincidence
Right.
is what I'd say.
I guess they were prophesying the advent of Google Earth.
yeah.
So what was it saying about that ram that it had two different sides?
It's representing the Medes and the Persians, which is the exact that ram's head is directly in between the Medes and the Persians and moving in the right direction.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, Iran's got no land in the land covenant. That's why they're the best people that we could probably convert, for lack of a better word. The other Muslims, they'd have to give up Saudi Arabia, I don't know, half of Jordan, Syria, who knows? But
the question,
all the way down to Egypt.
It seems like enough of a coincidence. Like it looks enough like a ram's head and it's exactly in between the Medes and the Persian region.
And the Euphrates
it
dry
seems like
up.
it brings up the question of whether or not we should ask the question if somehow he could see that or knew that was there to use that symbolism. I mean, it seems almost that much to me anyway. Even if you don't take a supernatural view of it, I'm saying like, what the heck? Like, it's not just that there's a ram's head somewhere. It's that it's in the exact right region between the two countries it's meaning to represent. You know what I mean? I mean, am I stupid? Am I crazy?
No, zoom out a little bit, and it looks like a hand is holding Saudi Arabia. Zoom in on the real Mount Sinai, and it looks like Don Quixote, that mask, the guy that chased windmills, like like a white mustache and like a white beard, thin beard. It looks like that. Yeah, this is
all right, guys. It's getting late for me. I'm gonna dip out. Good talking to y'all.
Good to see you again, eh?
Bye. Sorry we couldn't continue.
Yeah, I'd love to keep talking at some point though. So.
Well, you can stay. I'm done. I'm just curious how you guys react to that. Like, I'm not into that sort of thing, really. Honestly, like I'm not into that weird sort of stuff.
I will say, Jamie, that is interesting. It's interesting. I'll give you that.
Yeah, I just like to see how people respond, because some people respond like, "Oh, you're crazy. That's just a coincidence. It doesn't really look like it." But I'm wondering if they're even seeing what I'm seeing.
No, it looks like a ram or a cow type ram. Like it could be a ram. Yeah. So it looks like a ram. You're right.
Yeah,
about
that's
that.
like a giant natural dried lake bed, the white part, and then the horns are a weird mountain range that like curls like that. It's a mountain. So.
No, it definitely looks like a ram from above. Like I would not deny that at all. It looks like a ram. So I don't think that can be denied.
Yeah. Well, from us, before you bounce, let me give you something to think about, because it sounds like you're angling towards the fine-tuning argument before. And my thing, I don't buy the fine-tuning argument, is that the proposed God of Christianity could made the world in any way to have life sustaining in any numerous versions of ways. And so even if the world appeared to be a different way, God did it would still be an adequate answer. And so if it answers everything, it answers nothing.
Yeah, it's actually not the fine-tuning argument. I don't use the fine-tuning argument, first of all, because we don't know enough about the universe, and I really don't think we're at a point yet where we can say that we understand this well enough to say everything's fine-tuned. The argument, but it's the same kind of people proposing this. It's a separate argument where. And I think you mentioned it, where the calculation of accumulation of genetic information in DNA, you know, it's the naturalistic mechanisms are basically mathematically impossible. It's incredibly unlikely.
It's
So,
very low, but I still have no probability to compare it against. You know,
yeah, so what I would say to you is, I mean, I honestly, I would just say at the very least, you're kind of left with nothing at that point. If you don't want to, entertain the idea that intelligence could have done this, then you should probably admit that there's just no explanation at the moment that makes sense. How would you feel
no,
about that?
I told you I'll accept a very generic deism. Say a god who created stuff and then left to go make another creation, but he has no interaction or expectations from any his beings he made.
Well, it would have to be some type of theistic God, because he's the one he's at least concerned enough to create the living things in a certain way. So it's not just a deist, clock universe thing where he just kind of, pushes the first domino. God is actively involved in the creation of living organisms. So there's at least that much interaction.
But it's not to say that that interest could not just be a self-interest of his own. He enjoys creating universes. He doesn't mean he enjoys interacting with them. Like
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
so he could just make it just because he's like the joy of painting. I like making the painting, and then I go off and make another painting. So
yeah, that's I would definitely consider that possible. And one thing, I know I just said I'm going to leave, but switching to like another criticism of naturalism. Just how do you feel about people who say naturalism invalidates the possibility of rational thought? Have you heard of that before, or do you not agree with it?
because we're a bunch of molecules bouncing type of stuff, or what's the reasoning?
Well, the reasoning goes, our thoughts, according to naturalism, are determined by brain chemistry, and brain chemistry is the forces of nature. They're not directed towards any certain end. So if the molecules in our brain really are just kind of bouncing around in there, how can we be certain rational thoughts are forming?
That's where we compare them to the objective world, compare the subjective to the objective, but you really can't, because that's a deep philosophical problem you're talking about. It actually goes into what my whole deconversion story was, but last pillar for me was loss of supernatural personal experience.
Well,
And
Poop,
so,
let me really quickly show you an actual picture of the intricacy of the genome really quick, okay?
okay. That guy's
well done.
That guy's a lowercase g, or he's an uppercase
Yeah,
g.
back to the hood.
So what I would say about that is, even like, I don't know if you caught the beginning of my stuff, is that I have bipolar, which with psychotic features. There were times I thought I was Christ. There was times I believed fully in solipsism. I was the only truly existing being. There is no way to actually epistemically rule some of these things out. Like, whatever God propositions you could give me, I could transform into solipsism propositions and say, well, how are you here? How was the history before you? Because I created that way. I, just like Jesus, I incarnated to be in my own creation. Like, whatever anybody could say to bolster the God claim could be used for solipsistic arguments too. Does that make sense?
So you're basically saying we can't prove we're not in the Matrix. Is that?
I don't see how you could. One of the things about the Matrix is I used to love Matrix theory channels, and there's this one theory that went around that was like the real world, the world of the real, whatever that they woke up into, that really post-apocalyptic wasteland, was also part of the Matrix. But it was part of the Matrix meant to control the top 1% of stubborn minds. And so those who were not content in the regular Matrix and had to like feel like they were heroes, or on a bigger scale than the average people, they would break free from the regular Matrix, but they were just shuffled on into this other Matrix outside the Matrix. And so, yeah, I don't see how anybody's ever gonna like get past that philosophical problem. Definitely not me, for sure.
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's a tough one, but let's.
I'm not disagreeing with your line of reasoning, Ant. I hope you don't think I'm like dissing on you, Anthony. I like the arguments you're using. I think they're good arguments. I just think I'm just trying to have fun, you know.
No, it was funny. No, that little gnome was funny. Yeah, I laughed. I laughed.
He's back to the hood. Yeah. Yeah, you can find anything anymore on the internet. I swear, type in anything. I type you know, like for instance, one day I was like, I was thinking about like people jumping the shark, and I was like giving crap to Smokey Saint before he died, and I just typed in like I'd like to see like the Grim Reaper riding a shark, and then sure enough, this came up.
Oh, Smokey Saint died?
No, I just say he died because
socially.
Oh,
yeah. That's a joke. It's a joke. But yeah, and sure enough, there's a really cool picture of a Grim Reaper, you know, riding the shark. So of course, right?
Yeah, that's fun.
You were saying, eh?
Yeah. Well, the whole we can't prove we're not in the Matrix. I think everything does kind of evolve to that point eventually. But if you kind of assume like Descartes, I think, therefore I am, and we are kind of, you know, we're confronted with this reality that's before us, and we're just going to use that. I think if we're just going to, you know, which philosophical system explains what we're observing in this reality as we observe it, I do think naturalism has that pitfall of it renders impossible logical, you know, rational thought, but maybe that's a discussion we could have for another time, because I'm getting my brain's starting to fizzle out here. So,
all right, good talk.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Later, eh?
So I just wanted to show you one more thing that was interesting about that the Google Earth thing that's worth just showing too, because there's a little bit more. So in Daniel 8, after it talks about the ram, and then it says, and suddenly a goat with a prominent horn between its eyes came from. This is the vision, right? That Daniel's having, describing the empires that were described in Nebuchadnezzar's dream, the 4 empires, and this one's obviously representing Alexander the Great, because what the details it gives, everybody agrees on that too. Most scholars who aren't believers would say it's because it's written after the fact, right? So, so the goat with a prominent horn between its eyes came from the west. Okay, so that's a problem for what I'm going to show you, but that's where the country is that he came from, right? Because this is the Greek Empire, which defeats the Medes and Persian Empire, right? So I saw attack the 2-horned ram, shattering its 2 horns, blah blah blah. So yeah, it has 4 horns come up in the place of 1. Those are the empires that rose up when he died. Oh, he left. Oh, there he is. He's still here.
I accidentally hit the wrong button.
Okay, so you could hear me. So yeah, in the text in Daniel 8, the ram comes after the goat because it's Greece, right? That defeats the Medes and the Persians, mainly just the Persian Empire. But yeah, one last thing I just wanted to show you too that's interesting about it. Let me share it real quick, and then we can go on to whatever else. I just kind of want to see what you guys think of this sort of thing. It's kind of
during the Maccabean time, right? Greece. That's during the Maccabean time.
Right, so you can see the ram right like there. You even see both horns right curled over. It even comes to a tip right by its eye right there, right? The ram's head. That's a dry lake bed if you look into it. And these are just mountains that are curled really weird. So okay, so I mean, there's like an eye there and everything, like a nostril, everything. It's weird. Okay, so after that, and it's moving in the direction. Well, the thing with the ram, the goat comes after defeats the ram, so it comes after, right? So you see it. Right there. It's like a goat with its right foot like bent backwards, like at the joint there, like it's like digging its foot in and kicking dirt back. But that's like its whole body.
Left.
Yeah, facing left. It's got like a beard and a body there with the 4 legs, and the front right leg. Maybe you look at it like it's bent up to its chest, kind of, or under its, you know, sort of thing. And like it's definitely not very detailed, right? But look at that. Like there's the head. It kind of looks like a lion's head, really. But yeah.
So I have a question, because I get down with the symbological stuff you're talking about. Like, have you heard about the face on Mars?
Yeah, I definitely think that's kind of crap.
But it's the same type of thing. So people saw a
Yeah.
face on Mars with a telescope. Would I be justified in concluding that that is evidence of the Greek god Mars because we saw his face on Mars?
I think it'd be reasonable to like wonder, but I think when they showed the other angles, it was just a. But these
Well,
are
I'm sure.
specific animals. Like because
Yeah.
they're specific animals, and the ram is exactly in the country that it represents, and then you could even say that goat. I mean, the goat one, I don't know which is more crazy or weird looking, but it's like it's in the right region, and that one's like comes after the other one. So, I mean, I don't know, man. It almost is enough for me to wonder if they knew it was there somehow. I don't know. You think that? I mean, maybe that's stupid. I don't know.
No, that's very interesting. I don't know what they really even make of
I'd
it.
like to hear how it strikes people, and if they think it's just like, is that enough? Like to be in the right place and be that detailed? Like, because I've looked around on there, and like, I can't find anything that like as far as the Rams head, like anything like that anywhere else, and or anything similarly is like good of a symbol, and then to have it actually be there in the exact right place, it just seems like it makes me wonder if like I looked around the region, like could you kind of see it from like a mountaintop or something? No, it doesn't seem possible or plausible, and I don't know. Anyway, I just thought I'd just see what you'd say.
You yourself said when you first showed it that because we all see the curled ramp, the horn, but we also all see at first a cow face, not a ram
Yeah,
face.
well, here I can show you a picture of
No,
a
I
ram
saw a
right
ram.
now.
Yeah, I
I mean,
saw
if
a
you look
ram.
at the ram, if you look up a ram, that's that kind of ram with the thick horns like that. I mean, that's how their head is shaped, and they even have a black line down there, like from their eye to their nose down the side of their snout. There's ones with that look to them, like they have that streak there. So it's just
And
like
the other
what?
one, and the other one looked like it could be a horse as well with
Yeah,
a
the other
line.
one, yeah, the other one's
inside of it.
weird and it's swirled and
Yeah,
messed up and whatever,
yeah.
and like whatever. But it does jump out at you too, and it is the fact that there's a goat that with a single horn. You know, it's like what?
So I have a question about biblical, I guess, exegesis. And so I've heard you talk about Daniel's prophecy a couple times, and Daniel's prophecies, various ones, are usually held up in very high regards amongst a lot of Christians. Like, oh, this is so blatantly obvious. You know, how can't you guys see this stuff? And so when I'm talking to Chris, not you, because you already talked about the verse I'm going to bring up, but when I'm talking to a Christian and they're like, well, here's a horn and a goat and a ram and it's all symbological, they have no problem exegeting the perfect interpretation of that. But when I bring up Luke 19:27, it's like, well, it's a parable. It's a dude. It's like their brain shuts off all of a sudden. And it's like, I don't know how to read this thing right. And I'm like, dude, you can tell me what a horn and a goat and a ram and all this different stuff means, and then it comes to like the plain reading of a guy saying kill this other people, like all of a sudden your brain stopped working. Like, what the hell happened?
Well, I can tell you about that parable. Like, I do think Jesus is going to bring judgment when he returns. So, like, I'll tell you, like, I do think people are going to die. But I don't think I don't think that the proper interpretation of that in any sense, because of other teachings and what that is talking about, would allow you to like, should allow someone to think that it's okay. Cause like vengeance is mine, says the Lord. So like, this is after his return. That's kind of how I'd look at it. Like, and so like I would be vehement that the teaching of Christ for the call for a Christian, at least until his return, because there's plenty of verses that say it's his judgment to be made, right? And so in the call to the believer from the first century until his return would be absolutely no getting ahead of yourself in that sense, at least. And like I'm not saying, I don't even have my eschatology. The problem for me is I don't see anywhere that any other teaching anywhere that's talking about us actually killing anybody, but some people make that interpretation. I don't. So that's in that sense, I don't know what to make of it. But like whoever dies in the end are the ones judged that are worthy of judgment. And so in no sense should anyone be doing that, although many did, even the Protestants did, right? And so that's terrible.
Yeah.
I think it's missing Jesus' teaching, I think.
Are you saying that we're going to be killing these people?
True believers will be killing the non-believers, according to that passage. Yes.
Well, I read it. I just figured it was the lake of fire, and that's where they were going, and we After God judged them in such that they sentenced them, we're just the bailiff escorting them out to the lake of fire. The Baptists believe from that verse, they're supposed to be kicking the Catholics into the lake of fire.
Yeah, it's an othering verse. It's an us versus them verse. But I wasn't really talking about you so much, Jamie, because you've already said that you need to think about it. But I mean, I asked this verse to a lot of Christians, and
I just don't understand why you think it would be grandma or
it'll
somebody.
be any non-believer.
Yeah, exactly. I just don't know why you would. Yeah, like the Baptist. Yeah, exactly. Why would you section it out and say my church is going to? Exactly. Yeah, you can't do that.
Yeah, and so like I said, Jamie, I'm not saying a knock on you personally, but like especially the more pacifist type of Christians. There, if I tell them, hey, there's this verse where Jesus is instructing one group to kill another group, because it's not so much I trip out about the judgment and the wrath part. I don't care about that. It's the moral implications. Because a lot of people think that God won't ask somebody to kill somebody anymore. And I'm like, well, here's a verse in the New Testament. It's not just an Old Testament verse.
They're not killing them. God's killing them. God killed them and saying, hey, you're going to the lake of fire.
No,
and then God has us do it.
Read the verse. He says, bring them in front of me and slaughter them.
Slay them. Yeah, slaughter, slay, whatever.
They're going to be slain in the spirit, bro.
But the only way
they'll start talking tongues and falling.
The only slaughtering in heaven is the lake. That's the only slaughtering is the lake.
But the slaughtering term in the Greek is to denote like how you would slaughter an animal. So slitting throats, gutting, flaying, any things that you can imagine what you do to a pig or a shrimp or a fish. Not a shrimp, but a fish. That's what it's kind of denoting in that verse.
Yeah, I don't read it that way. I read it like they're going to get the sentencing of death, and we're to.
Yeah, I'm going to look at it because there is a sense that I believe there are deaths that occur at the coming, but the final death is at the end of the 1,000 years. But I think, I'll have to look at that and see what I think it's the typology, or how to connect that to eschatology. But I do think it's rather clear, at least in my interpretation, of course. But I think the majority interpretation. Well, I can't even say that. I'll just say I feel like it's fairly clear, like what we're called to do, and it wouldn't be violence. But yeah, that brings up a little bit of a interesting point as far as how. I mean, people could misuse it. I don't disagree. I mean, for sure.
I'm sure they have, but it's more speaks to the broader topic of objective morality, and a lot of believers believe in divine command theory. So if God asks you to do something that we would tend to think is immoral, it magically becomes moral because he commands you to do it, like the binding of Isaac or whatever.
I would say it can't be that it's magically moral, like for sure. Like it has to be consistent. I would want to argue.
Yeah, and that would be with the consistency of God's nature. But if we're sitting in this sweet spot, Pine Creek just had a video about this of Old Testament God asking people to kill people, and then now we're in the sweet spot where he would never do that, but even though he did. And then we have a future event where it really, really, really looks like he's commanding his old ways back again. Like, hey, kill other people. What the heck happened to God's nature in that sweet spot? And where is objective morality when it's going kill people, don't kill people, don't kill people,
Yeah, I think thing we can lose track of it is Christians, especially ones that are less aggressive or whatever, is that there is a point. It seems to me like if you're going to make I don't see how universalists deal with this without going full Marcion. It's like we have to get real with the idea that like there is going to be a point where like people will be taken out for the better of according to God, and I think it's a hard pill to swallow for some of us. And but I do believe that. I guess I have to admit, like, I trust God's judgment, but I don't think it's just random or he's getting angry and so he wants somebody dead. I think it's righteous or whatever. And because I think it doesn't make sense to think we can just reform everybody. I mean, I don't believe that that's necessarily possible, but I struggle with those questions. Like, wouldn't everybody who's lost just be ignorant in some sense, and like that they couldn't be explained to, and like even like the worst criminal, like didn't they just mess up and real bad and then get poisoned in some sense? Like, couldn't they be reformed or whatever? I mean, there must be some for me, I just think like there's something intuitive about nature or whatever, where like you're responsible for yourself to some certain degree. Like, of course, like if you have like some disability that's causing issues for you, like I don't think God's going to judge someone for that. But I haven't worked all that out in my head. I just think I trust that God's righteous, I guess I would say, and fair, completely fair. I really get up in arms when like Calvinists say God's not fair. If he was fair, he'd kill you. I'm like, no, because Jesus paid for the penalty, remember? So he is being fair. He's so fair he killed Jesus. Don't tell me he's not fair, retard.
If he was fair, he wouldn't have created you in the first place. If you knew you're gonna die,
right? Well, yeah, I mean, I get the point, like that people make about being fair, but I want to say he is fair, and like that's why he had to. Yeah, there's substitutionary atonement or whatever, things like that. Like, and God won't be mocked in that sense. Like, I think that's my theodicy anyway. So, anyways, if you guys have last words, I'm just totally out of gas.
No, we're all good here, brother. Have a good night, you two. Nice meeting y'all.
Yeah, this is fun. Mike, if you like some Trinity bashing, my latest video is making fun of Trinity math. You might get a laugh out of it.
Yeah, their whole model, even their model fails. You can't put like God in the middle and then have a spoke out to Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Start out putting Father in the middle, and you're gonna run into big problems.
God is king, but Jesus is divine and God, and the Holy Spirit is God. I don't care about the Trinity. I just think the Bible teaches that the Holy Spirit is God's spirit, and that Jesus is God, and that the Father is God, and Jesus is the Son, and he's the Father. And they're all called God, and there's three of them, but there's one God. And so I just say I believe the Trinity because I believe all those things I just listed are taught in the Scripture. So
yeah,
that's my position. I could care less about the word Trinity. In fact, I kind of don't. I mean, I have the tendency, if it's Catholic, to not particularly trust it per se, but I'm going to look into it, and I did, and I think it's pretty much legit in that sense. As far as
if you either believe that God the Father is the exact same thing as God the Son, or if you believe that he's like two separate, or they're one and two or three or whatever, please don't ever forget he is the prophet spoken of in I think Deuteronomy 18. And confirmed when they asked John the Baptist, "Are you Elijah? No. Are you the Messiah? No. Are you the prophet?" Yeah, they were waiting for that prophet to come. Also, still Son of God. I'm not taking any divinity away from him, but let's not forget he's also that prophet.
Well, I mean, he is Christ, which means Messiah.
Well, you know who always gets left out of the Trinity is the plant incarnation of Jesus. It's the burning bush. He came to the earth as a plant, as the burning bush, and nobody ever puts that.
Kind of, yeah, I guess so. I mean, he was in it, right?
Yeah, he's a plant incarnation, so that's a quadrinity.
That's like saying Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were like God because they were saved out of the fire. No, they were in the fire, and it felt like springtime in there. So, no, the bush had nothing to do with it. Was just a spectacle of the fire, but it did not consume anything it touched, let alone that bush. The fire was God, the Holy Spirit. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you this: if you thought the mind-body problem was a issue, wait till the mind-soul's problem.
Oh, you should see fire in no gravity. Have you seen that? Like regular fire gives off like CO2, but fire in no gravity gives off like CO or something. Or oh man, it was good. Anyway, y'all have a good night.
All right, guys. Thanks for coming in the audience, and anytime, brother. Both of you guys, anytime.
Late.